Good evening. I'm calling to order the City Council study session for Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Christine Brown, City Clerk. Please state for the record if you are present after I call your name. Mayor Matthews. Present. Deputy Mayor Quitslin.
Present.
Councilmember Dietz.
Present.
Councilmember Fentroy Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Hytopoulos.
Present.
Councilmember Morawaki.
Present.
Councilmember Schneider.
Present.
Thank you.
So all are present. Also, our City Manager, Blair King, and the City Attorney, Jim Haney, other members of the staff in the room with us. I'll begin with the land acknowledgement, starting with words attributed to Chief Seattle on an occasion in 1854. Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished. We will begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is within the ancestral territory of the people of clear salt water, Suquamish people, expert fishermen, canoe builders, and basket weavers. The Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's Central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councilmember Morawaki.
Thank you, Mayor Quitslin. I move approval of the consent agenda as permitted, as submitted. Just the agenda.
Yes.
I second.
Moved by Councilmember Morawaki, seconded by Councilmember Fentroy Johnson. The question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Are there any conflicts of interest to disclose? Seeing none, our regular business. We begin with a series of annual reports and work plans being presented to us and received in order. Beginning with the Ethics Board.
Good evening, everyone. I am Donia Keating. I'm the chair of the Ethics Board. I'm going to run you through this very quickly. We've had a very straightforward year. The first thing is with respect to our complaints and our advisory opinions. We only had one complaint in 2024. That was EB 2024-01. It was reviewed and discussed and dismissed per determination letter in April of 2024 by our board. And we concluded that the allegations did not rise to the level of a violation of the conflict of interest under Article 2, Section D, 1A and B. So that was all we had for last year, which is in some ways good news. We also have 3 previously reported complaints that have been rolling over on a consecutive basis for a few years now. And it's been referenced in our prior reports, primarily because there is a deferment while the board waits for the ruling in related litigation. So that's it. With respect to the ethics board members, we have 7 typically board members. Right now, we're operating with 6 of them. We recently had a resignation by one of them. So we have 3 that are actually terming out in June of 2025. That's Rosemary Hollinger, Donna Davidson, and Rafael Escandon. So obviously, with 4 potential vacancies that are coming up, it's going to be particularly important to make sure that we get more people interviewed and placed in those positions so that we don't have the rollovers for a year or more like we've had in the past, myself included. Another member, myself, obviously, I'm the chair. Like I said, I've been serving since last year. My term expires in June. My deputy chair is now Hilda Sass, who is one of our newer members. Her term ends in June of 2027. We also have Karen Anderson, who's actually a returning member. She served on the board previously, very briefly, and now she's returned. She is actually completing a prior term for someone else, and so her term ends in June of 2026. That's all the relevant stuff we have regarding that. But again, reiterating, we have 4 vacancies that are pending. With respect to changes to the ethics program, we have incoming city council and advisory group members receive ethics board training. We did not have official in-person training in 2024. The last time we did that was in 2023. So obviously we're looking to do that this year wherever possible. And what we did was the city staff and the city liaisons had confirmation from all of the advisory group individuals to confirm whether or not they had actually taken that training. With respect to training, to append to that, we've updated our written content. There's some pending issues, as you know, with you going back to November of 2024 regarding prior changes that we had requested that you have approved, and they're now being reviewed, and the city will be coming back to you with a resolution that will help us to incorporate those changes into our training so that when we do provide it this year, it'll be updated. Other than that, we've been incorporating case studies so that we can have more on the ground back and forth in case anyone has any questions about how the code applies in practice. And then we've also updated our slides to include things like just other things that are coming up for us that we want people to understand about open meeting, public meetings, rolling meetings, things like that people really don't necessarily understand. We also had a survey that went out, and we're waiting for the results back from that so that we can have an ongoing dialogue with our advisory groups, with you, regarding ways that we can improve what we're doing. And to the extent that that's already existing in the code, we won't be changing anything. We'll just be, adding to it to make sure that it's more robust. Speaking of how we do our training, we typically have one live session with you in council chambers during one of your meetings. It's also part of Zoom and it's recorded. We invite the public in case they have any questions of us. The other training that we do is in chambers. It's usually 2 people, sometimes the chair, the vice chair, whoever wants to do it on our board. That gets recorded. That is with a PowerPoint and it's uploaded to the website on the ethics board page. There is an existing version of that right now from 2023. We'll be updating that. Sometimes we do a third thing, which is we'll go to a planning commission meeting, for instance, and we'll do something like that live. We haven't really decided whether or not we're going to do that again this year. It's a discussion that we're having with the city regarding resources and availability, because we'd like to be more appreciative of the time and resources that you guys have available. So that's where we are with that. Let's see what else we've got for you that's relevant. Technical assistance, same thing every year. We need the cooperation from city staff to send notices of the training sessions out to the public, to all current members of the advisory groups, to city council, to schedule those training sessions and provide the board with the necessary tools to record that so that it's Zoom and everything else. And we also just schedule the joint training with city council to keep track of which committees and commission and board members have actually taken that training. And as we've discussed, I'm not going to get into that because it's more from the past reports, but we're trying to make that required. And so, some logistics for that need to be worked out if that is actually effectuated. And also we talked about the survey. So that's something we're doing. And I think that's pretty much it for the training. We're just looking to get that done as soon as possible. Some changes to the ethics code and the operating rules. It is very, very simple and very administrative this year, which is a good thing. The main thing is really the pamphlet for the ethics, the code and the operating guidelines. We haven't done pamphlets in many years. In fact, I've been on the board for almost 5 years and we've never done pamphlets. So we're trying to make sure that what we're doing aligns with what's documented. So we wanted to just extract that from the code and from the operating rules so that we're not misleading anyone or actually, pushing any expectations that we're not meeting. The other thing is really, very minor, and it's really because of how we operate as a board. We know that we have templates, all of us, to use for recording the minutes, and typically you only record the actions that you take and not what was said. But because of what we do as an ethics board, and we decided we didn't want people to feel like they had to watch every single meeting in its entirety in order to extract relevant information regarding our discussion points, we kind of gave ourselves a little leeway in our operating rules to put a little bit more in there. It's not voluminous, but it is relevant. In terms of our work plan priorities, They're pretty much continual. We continue to assist city council by encouraging the timely application and consideration and interview and processing of new people so that we don't have any gaps and leadership gaps on our board. We also design any appropriate updates to the ethics program during the term based upon anything that comes our way. We like to have an open dialogue, as I said, with the public, with you, with the advisory boards regarding ways that we can improve. And to the extent that it doesn't require too much machination or any kind of changes in terms of the code, we like to try to incorporate those updates into what we do. Also, with the assistance of city staff, we'll make sure that everyone receives the ethics program training. And to be specific, also our ethics board members. I am very, very adamant about the fact that we need to eat our own dog food. And, you know, I in particular get a little bit bent out of shape when I feel like our board isn't walking our talk. I think it's important that we do that. And try to do that along the same time period that we're doing like Open Public Meetings Act training so that everything is kind of congealed. Also Q&A support, which is in the way of, it's a proactive way of governance. It's not waiting for the complaints. It's trying to be preemptive. It's trying to have a dialogue so that if you have an advisory opinion or a question or a thought, you know, you can contact us and do, you know, a request for waiver, a request for advisory opinion, whatever that is, which is important so that we can make sure that everyone's trying to be in compliance with good governance. And then increasing our public exposure. I think it's a fair statement that all advisory bodies, in addition to city council, care about outreach because it's part of engendering trust with our community and having an open conversation and being transparent. So some of the things that we've done in the past, we've been at the farmers market. We'd obviously like to do that again to the extent that's possible. We'd like to participate in the Moonlight Market, National Night Out, other community events such as the youth engagement effort that you're working on right now so that we can speak to those young civic-minded students and you know, with facts on the ground regarding how we actually operate as a board versus just a broad overview. And we've also done presentations and podcasts, you know, with the Senior Citizen Center. We've done Barn. And then myself and Dr. Escondon just did a podcast recently with Barn again, which is probably going to be circulating in the community. So we want to keep that line of communication open. And also to continue to refine and clarify our ethics program and to emphasize again and again and again, especially in this internet world where people get distracted, that our mission is educational. We are not looking to weaponize or burn or harm. This is a process and we're not always going to get it right, whether it's on the board side or whether it's on the quote unquote, you know, respondent side. It's really about trying to make sure that we understand we're all trying to do the right thing here. And that's the energy we like to bring forward. And I think the other thing is just continuing to respond to the official complaints that we get and the inquiries regarding how we operate. There's a big difference between talking about ethics in generalities versus ethics as it relates to the code. The code is not always comprehensive. That's why we have a conversation with you about ways to add things that we may not have anticipated. And that's it for me, unless you have any questions.
I will ask, I just want to make a comment. You're going to be a hard act to follow. This has been terrific. I think you really put the ethics board on the map in this meeting, and it's a place where other people want to serve, I believe. We just want to get those seats filled going forward. Councilmember Moravec first, and then Councilmember Dietz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I'm going to slightly echo the Deputy Mayor's comments. Very comprehensive report, and it looks like you've done a lot of work. I appreciate that. And please, I think the rest of us would like to thank you and the board for all your work you're doing. I don't think this rises to quite the level of conflict of interest, but I want to congratulate you and Mike for your 28th anniversary this weekend. And thank you too for inviting me to share that celebration with you and your just impossible to understand and believe daughter, Meryl. Just outstanding. So thank you.
You're welcome. Any other thoughts?
Councilmember Dietz.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for coming. It's an excellent report. So I wanted a quick question, and then I was going to make the motion. But I remember last year there was a discussion to one change, and maybe this is already in the works, but it was sort of old complaints, like someone said 5 years ago this happened. So sort of a statute of limitations. Do you know where that is? I'm just using that as, that's something that just comes to mind. I remember.
Yes, and in fact, I was referencing that. So in your November 12th meeting, a part of your agenda, we had been asking this for a couple of times. And what we really asked for and what we're waiting for, and so just so the public is aware, is it's establishing a limit of 12 months for complaints so that people don't file beyond that, because it makes it hard from an administrative standpoint. If you're trying to be, if you're trying to exercise due diligence, to keep going back to things that may have expired or situations that may have expired. And the premise being that if something is educational, there's no reason why anyone should feel like they have to wait before filing a complaint or before reaching out to us to try to resolve something. So that was one of the things.
Okay, so that's in the works. Okay.
Yes, so that's in the works still per the resolution that you guys need to approve.
Okay.
Before you.
Oh, okay, sure.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Matthews.
I wanted to just thank Donia for so many years of wonderful service. I listened to some of the ethics board meetings and you really elevate them, and your just complete level of professionalism, knowledge is really, really, really going to be hard to follow. So hopefully you stay forever, but I'm not sure if that's possible. And I know you've stayed, I believe, over your term anyway. So just thank you, thank you, thank you. It was really cool to hear the word pamphlet and realize how vintage that sounds. It's funny, though, just a word. And then as far as your 4 vacancies, my dream, I don't know if this is possible, but would be at some point for us to be able to fill that with a member, a youth member. So I don't know how we keep going down that path to try to get that to happen, but that would be amazing since they're 4. And that was it. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Hottoplus.
Well, I have a question, but I'll start with as well. Thanking you for your years of service, and I'm going to stop it at that because in a sense, you guys sit in judgment of us. So I'm going to keep the flowery down a little bit. But my question just is, I'm just not remembering with regards to this sort of statute of limitations concept. Would that be from the time that the situation was discovered, or would that be regardless? So if something came up that nobody knew about for, 18 months, has
That's
that
good.
been discussed?
That's a good question. And I think that that's something that we should probably explore further, because if someone's not aware of it, then it's like if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? And so it's really about the good faith effort on our part is not to just run a clock so that we can preclude people from filing. It's really about, from the moment of awareness, let's try to run a clock from there in good faith. I mean, I'm speaking for myself only, not the board. It's a discussion that we have to delve into a little deeper, but right now it looks like it's just, 12 months from the point of awareness, which makes sense.
Councilmember Deeds.
Yeah, thank you. I'll make the motion. Let's see. Didn't have my glasses. I move to forward the 2025 work plan to a future business meeting for consideration of approval.
Second.
Yes. Moved by Councilmember Deeds, seconded by Councilmember Morawaki. Are we ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi.
Any opposed? Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Yeah. Papers here. The next in order is the Design Review Board. Oh.
It's a walk-on music or something. Wow, didn't know we had a production company. That was dramatic. Thank you, members of the City Council, for inviting me to report on the Design Review Board's 2024 activities and our 2025 work plan. Todd Thiel, the lead of the board, I guess, chairman of the board. 2024 was a very busy year for Design Review Board. We had 17 meetings, which is 3 times the number of meetings that we had in 2023. Our work focused mainly on the review of the development projects as required by the Bainbridge Island Municipal Code. The Design Review Board reviewed and made recommendations on the following 8 projects, several of which help address climate and housing priorities identified by the City Council. 257 Woodab Cottage Development, Housing Resource Bainbridge Erickson Project, Clark Construction Office, Peppinger Short Plan Division, Deer Cliff Community, the Peelskin Colgren Primary Short Plat, and the PPB South Division. Additionally, as directed by the City Council on January 13, 2023, the Design Review Board worked to develop the proposed amendments to the municipal code and administrative procedures to comply with the new state rules regarding design review, House Bill 1293. This mandatory change to design review involved a detailed chapter by chapter examination on the part of the entire board to analyze the existing standards in the Design for Bainbridge manual and identify possible amendments to ensure objectivity. The DRB also worked to address reducing the design review meeting process from 3 to just 1. Our 2025 Design Review Board work plan priorities will focus on implementing the new processes once they've been adopted. Specifically, we'll work on updating procedures regarding the revised design review meeting with a specific agenda, documentations, including templated conditions to ensure that what we discuss goes with direction throughout the building process. The DRB will also support the adoption process as the package of amendments is anticipated to be presented to the Planning Board and City Council in Q1 and Q2 of 2025. The DRB will continue to review development projects as outlined in the code and as projects are submitted with I think June 2025 is when the new regulations will take effect. So in closing, I'd like to thank the DRB members for their dedication to getting this work done. Elaine Lifkins, Mark Aubin, Howard Howlett, and Gregory Hunt. I'd also like to thank John Quitzland for being our liaison and who's served with us through the process through some many discussions. Marlene Schubert for keeping us on record, and HB Harper for researching and answering our seemingly endless questions, updating the design review for Bainbridge book itself, and then also writing the associated administrative procedures and code. Thank you, Council.
Yes, are there comments, questions following up on this? Councilmember Morawaki?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Quitchlin. Just of all the projects you listed, what was the most interesting one to work on?
The most interesting?
Mm-hmm.
One that wasn't listed, because I didn't forget about it, I think it was this year, was the new facility at the ferry terminal. That's going to be quite an attractive building, and it won't be just another jumble of things that are there. But then also all the housing that's coming. I mean, I think that's been interesting. It's never easy. It's always a debate. And we do need more of it. So it's good to have those discussions.
Thank you.
A couple of things I just wanted to add to highlight. You mentioned Marlene Schubert. She has been such an asset to everybody who works with her. I just want to single her out for a little attention. She knows the business and she's so helpful carrying things forward and keeping good order, keeping records.
Keeping us in line.
Things don't get by her. And I really like to see that. You mentioned, maybe you didn't mention 2 vacancies currently, and that's something that needs the community's attention. Because the design review board can function within the limits of what we have now, but it's much better when there are 7 members
Absolutely
truly on board and working together.
Yeah, I think in a maybe not bizarre way, but because we were together going through the Design for Bainbridge book,
yes,
that kept attendance high at every meeting and kept people coming back, which was a good draw. But sometimes when it's just not just projects to review, but there's not that continuation of a goal.
With reference to the Design for Bainbridge book and the related ordinance, tentatively at least, there is a public hearing scheduled for March 27th. And that will be an important occasion for Planning Commission. This will be a meeting with the Planning Commission for their review and recommendations. And that'll be a chance for the council to bring these things into focus, getting ready for our action subsequently. Councilmember Fantroy Johnson.
Yes, I move to forward the 2025 work plan to a future business meeting for consideration of approval.
Second.
Motion by.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
The Race Equity Advisory Committee is next.
Hello. And thank you all for your continued service to Kobe and to our community. Thank you, especially during these times where the work that the Race Equity Advisory Committee does is under fire, both locally and on the national stage. Our city council's overt commitment to our work, particularly in the last few months, has been seen and is appreciated. My name is Olivia Hall, and I am the co-chair of the Race Equity Advisory Committee. And yeah, here we go. In 2024, and in deep collaboration with the city's Equity and Inclusion Manager, Anshuahi, REAC made numerous impactful contributions to the Bainbridge Island community. Early this year, we organized council REAC workshops with consultant Scott Wynn and to come closer to a shared understanding and vocabulary around race equity, as well as the roles and the responsibilities of REAC members in the context of city governance. To that end, we made recommendations about city programs and policies, such as Kobe's Uncrewed Aerial Systems Program, which is the drone program, and the Zero Emissions Hand Tool Ordinance, which we did in collaboration with the Climate Change Advisory Committee. We also served on the Affordable Housing Project at 625 Winslow RFP review panel and submitted a letter of support for the project. One of the larger projects taken on this past year was REAC's participation in the Comprehensive Plan DEIS outreach process. We worked with planning at the early stages of DEIS comment period to develop materials and strategies to make the DEIS more accessible and the comment collecting more equitable. We hosted an event with the planning to make sure that even more people in the community could have their questions about the DEIS answered. Finally, we supported numerous community events such as Indigenous Peoples Day, MLK Day, and Juneteenth. All of this is not the full extent of our work at the city. So to learn more, please review our complete activities list in your packet. In 2025, we will continue to respond and initiate discussion with council on recommendations for policy action and community engagement, including issues arising on the national level. To deepen that work, we recently hosted a joint council and REAC meeting facilitated by consultant Scott Wynn to review how to use this equity toolkit. And I want to remind you that it was only last year that we were having this discussion about what it was even. So just look how far we've come. As part of this continued work in 2025, we are going to continue to encourage council to consistently apply the equity toolkit to policy decisions. And we once again invite you to call upon REAC for any guidance in using it this coming year and hopefully for many years to come. Already this year, we have continued and will continue to encourage council to use the toolkit and REAC as a resource when coming to conclusions and decisions regarding the revision of the comprehensive plan and the implementation of the housing action plan. This year, we also intend to develop a recommendation to update the city code for who can serve on REAC to include off-island business owners and those who have significant ties to the community. We also plan to continue our collaboration with the CCAC, making further recommendations on the Zero Emissions Hand Tool Ordinance and any other issues that include both climate change and equity, of which there are many. Finally, we fully intend to continue to support council's commitment to being a welcoming and inclusive city and the Keep Washington Working Act and prioritizing community safety as voiced in previous council meetings. Again, this is not the entire scope of our intended work, but in interest of time, I've only included the highlights. Please look to your packet or to any member of REAC to get an even deeper into our plans for 2025. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to any questions you may have. I think that
Thanks,
was a
Olivia.
time
Thanks,
record.
Olivia. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Getting better at this.
Councilmember Fantroy Johnson and then Mayor Matthews.
I guess I just wanted to know, you didn't mention whether or not you are short members or how many open positions.
We have one open position, I believe. Yes. We have one open position, which we're hoping to get our recommendation to update the code like before then, before the appointment. Yeah.
Mayor,
No, it's you.
Mayor Matthews and then
Me.
Councilmember Dietz.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Olivia, for your time record breaking report. It was really, 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 I would say it was everything you needed to say. So that's good. I can't think of the word, but that was it. It was really good. I have the same question or wish for the vacancy on the Race Equity Advisory Committee, that it could be, or if there were more than one vacancy filled by a youth member as well. I just think it's such a great spot to have a youth voice. And then I got to attend my first in-person meeting maybe last month as liaison, and I was blown away by the level of it was so much more than I thought we were going to be talking about, even in reference to the 625 building. And just, I'm really looking forward to all of the input, especially now that we have the toolkit. So thank you for all the work, especially now as we are, it's now more important than ever. So thanks for all you do.
Councilmember Dietz and Councilmember Morawaki and Councilmember Schneider.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good to see you, Olivia. Thanks for coming. And yeah, I let's see, attended the Race Equity Toolkit workshop. Let's see, Deputy Mayor was there, Councilmember Schneider, and Councilmember Fancher Johnson. Yeah, so very good. It was. I thought it was very one of the good things was how does this get applied, or how has this been applied? So Anshu had some great case studies of, that we've done, that she has done, or the city has done. So it shows how this toolkit can be applied successfully. So I think shows progress. I just wanted to bring up, in the spirit, the climate that we're all involved in, and I'll be speaking about this later, but I just saying, speaking for myself, and I know this, my colleagues all feel the same way, is we are not backing down on equity. Not this council, not this city. And so we support the Race Equity Advisory Committee, support our equity manager. Unlike some other jurisdictions that have waffled, we are not going to waffle, not here on Bainbridge. So just wanted to say that for the record. Thank you.
Councilmember Morawaki.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, since Councilmember Dees pretty much said what I want to say. But just a quick question on the report. It says there's position 5 and 6 vacant. So is there are those not, that's 2 positions open? Is that, it says positions 5 and 6, there are no member names. Is that the current situation?
Going down to 7.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And
Kristen.
yeah, and thanks. Just to maybe to amplify that, places all over are getting bullied and threatened, and even major corporations are dumping their equity officers. They spend a lot of millions of dollars, some of them locally, and where's that investment gone? Anshu's not going anywhere, I hope. But it'll be voluntarily on her part, but it won't be because of the city made a policy change. You can mark your words on that. Thanks for all your work.
Yeah, Anshu has been an absolute asset to our work as somebody who was on React pre-Anshu and post-Anshu. It is very, not that Ellen wasn't fabulous, but it's been night and day. So thank you.
Councilmember Schneider and then Councilmember Hytopoulos.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So my remarks are going to be somewhat similar to the previous couple of them, but with a little bit of a different slant. So I would really love for our communications out to the public, whether it's in the printed paper or in the weekly report or whatever, that we tell these stories about the impact that the equity lens is having. Because I mean, I learned things I didn't know. And I just think it's really important for the community to understand the impact that you're having. And how there's like, well, duh, of course we should have done that, you know, but we weren't on track to do, you know, some of these examples. So anyway, I just want to express appreciation for the work you do and just want to get some horns tooting about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hytopoulos.
Yeah, in a sense, this is a committee report, but it's apropos here. So I'm going to just say, I just want to be, especially because there were technical difficulties that didn't capture the steering committee meeting last week. I believe we had consensus that we wanted to get the toolkit back to us to work with as soon as possible, and for the planning commission, et cetera, sooner rather than later and back into the process. So I think we'll expect to see Anshu at the next meeting.
It's exciting. I don't know that.
I'll ask for a motion. Thank you.
I move to forward the 2025 work plan to a future business meeting for consideration of approval.
Yes, seconded by Councilmember Dietz. A motion made by Councilmember Fandre Johnson. Ready for the question? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you very much, Olivia.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure working with you. I've really, it's good dynamics.
Thank you. I agree. Bye.
The Utility Advisory Committee, represented by one of the co-chairs. Thank you. Charlie? Good. Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Well, you got the, what's the terminology, the proposed work plan, and I don't really have a whole lot to add to it. I can tell you that, you know, basically what we're focused on is looking at the reviewing the utility element of the city's comprehensive plan, which is of course in the process of a major revision. And so that has been going on for several meetings and will continue for a while. We also are looking at the utility rates, because that's something that has to be adjusted. And in particular, we've got the expansion of the new water unit up by the high school that is causing increase in some of our costs. And so we've got to figure out how we're going to match that. I don't really have a whole lot to add to all of that, because I think the proposed work plan and the summary of the 2024 activities pretty much summarizes what you need to know.
Happy to have questions about the contents of the work plan and how the committee is working together. Councilmember Dietz.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thanks, Charlie, for coming and giving your presentation. And actually, I didn't have any queries about the work plan per se, but I did want to kind of give you a heads up that the council agreed to start looking at policy guidelines for water conservation. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. And then,
that's a useful thought.
Yeah, so just let you know that is of interest to this council, and we haven't talked about it other than we agreed to talk about it. So, but I thought this is a good opportunity to let you know that water conservation is of interest to this council.
Yep. Well, and I think it's of interest to the committee members too. And that's the kind of thing that comes up periodically when it's relevant to the stuff we're looking at.
Councilmember Morawaki.
Thank you, Mayor Quitsland. Just want to add one thing that was impressive. I think Brenda was there, and Joe, when we first got elected, your committee took us on a tour of all the public works facilities, of which I had no idea we had some of those things. And you did it with such panache and expertise. It was really impressive. And I appreciate you and all the other members providing all of your
well, I think that's been of interest to we members of the committee as well. And we sort of make a point of taking all the new committee members out to that
Yeah.
to understand how the various pieces fit together and what all is going on.
Well, just a second thought, and perhaps that could be something that we could invite just our constituents, our citizens to go along, because it was really informative for me. So I think it would be great for allowed to the public.
Mayor Matthews?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Just wanted to thank you so much for your service. The institutional knowledge on your committee is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So thanks for all the work.
We have several committee members who have a long history with the city and
Yes, so
a
thanks
lot
for
of
all you
interest
do.
in things.
I'd like to add a comment to that because the institutional memory is important, but the relatively new people, they're all pros. They bring so much knowledge and level judgment, and it's a committee that works beautifully together. And you have to do an awful lot, not all by yourselves. You have consultants, but working with consultants needs a good dynamic. You don't just expect other people to do the work and then you put a stamp on it, approve it. It's been meticulous and a lot of wisdom coming into play, knowledge of the community.
We got a wide
really
range
serving
people asking good questions when the
Yeah.
questions need to be asked.
So I'll entertain a motion. Councilmember Deeds?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. I move to forward the 2025 work plan to a future business meeting for consideration of approval.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Morawaki of the motion by Councilmember Deeds. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Just thank you very much, Charlie, and
Well, thank you.
keep on keeping on.
Yep.
Yes. Now the city manager?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I was waiting for the next item on your agenda.
Yes.
And I
yes,
was just going to
right,
go ahead.
Right. We've completed these reviews. Now ready to receive a report, a presentation by the fire chief. Thank you.
Yes, so Chair, I was going to say that we have been in communication with Chief Moravec for a while about making a presentation to the council. With the recent LA wildfires and the catastrophic fires, we wanted to get this on in front of the council. People in the community expressed concern about Bainbridge's preparedness for a catastrophic wildfire. And with that, Chief Moravec, we have talked about what steps to be taken. The expectation is that tonight, the chief will talk just a bit about where we stand in preparation of a catastrophic wildfire and some of the difficulties we have in preparing for that. Then with that, maybe we'll be able to tear off. One of the important things that we want to stress, I think, both between ourselves and the fire department is public education, making sure the public's informed of what they can do to protect their property and help keep their neighbors and the community safe as we see the incidence of catastrophic wildfires increasing. So with that, this has been a little while coming. I apologize to the chief. He knows that he was up in the batter's box several times and we pushed it back for other reasons, but now he's finally here.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I wasn't here all that long ago, I think in October, to provide kind of an end of fire season update to the council. And that presentation reviewed some of the things I'm going to cover tonight, but it's a little bit more expansive. And we talked a little bit about the fire department's capability to respond and what we do to train, in addition to some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. But we're going to take a little bit deeper dive this evening. As the city manager mentioned, since October, we've had the catastrophic fires in California, of which Bainbridge Fire did send an engine and 4 firefighters to support that effort for a little over 2 weeks. And then even more recently, which you've probably heard in the news, that there was a lot of severe weather that went through the Midwest. A lot of that was about tornadoes, but one of the things that wasn't haven't really seen front and center was in Oklahoma, which I lived in Oklahoma for 4 years while I was getting my undergrad in Stillwater, Oklahoma. They had grass fires on Friday and they lost 100 homes in Stillwater due to wind-driven fires, a very similar scenario to what they had in California. And as we know, not all that long ago, we had a pretty significant wind event. Luckily, a lot of those wind events for us happen in the winter time. So that's helpful from a fire perspective, but we're not immune to having those types of wind events during the summer. And especially if we get what we call an east wind event, where we've got winds coming over the Cascades east, as the air moves over the mountains and comes down, it compresses and heats and it dries things out and creates a lot of instability for us. And we can have a bad day in the right conditions here. So I want to talk a little bit about all of those things and some ways I think that the fire department and the city and we'll need city council's help to get some movement in some areas to make sure that we're a little bit more resilient with respect to some things we can do in the municipal code and infrastructure as well. So next slide, please. So just to review, in October, obviously the 2024 numbers weren't complete, but we run a fairly significant number of vegetation fires on the island. The causes vary, but as I reported in October, most often this is related to wind type events or situations where we have vegetation coming in contact with power lines. But we also see a number of escaped recreational fires that happen as well. But the numbers over the past 4 years have continued to climb, and the fire department continues to work on public education with respect to that. Next slide, please. The fire department updated the Bainbridge Island Community Wildfire Protection Plan. The fire department's been the lead agency on that plan. We first developed that plan in 2010 when wildfire really wasn't on anybody's radar. But as time has gone by, there's been a lot more discussion with respect to climate change. It's obviously become a topic that is in the forefront of a lot of people's minds, especially us at the department. So our latest update was in 2022. This document, if you haven't had a chance to review it, is on the fire department's webpage, and it really lays out what the risk of wildfire is on Bainbridge Island. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, the city is aware of the risk of wildfire, and I'm very thankful that it was included in the city's climate action plan. So just a snippet of that climate action plan is that the plan wants to ensure that the city policies prioritize wildfire risk reduction in proximity to homes consistent with FireWise guidelines and strengthen wildfire risk reduction design guidelines for island construction. So really there needs to be a holistic approach. There's the response side of things, but if we're responding, we've already had some misses. The fire's already happened. So what we can do through defensible space and through design guidelines is a number of things. One is the way I describe defensible space is whether the fire starts at a home and spreads to the vegetation, or it's in the vegetation and goes to spread to the home. That defensible space, it's not a clear cut. I want to make that very clear. We're always looking for balance between safety and natural resources preservation. But what it does is takes a little bit of oomph out of that fire as it approaches the home, or it's harder for it to spread from the home into the surrounding vegetation. That's why defensible space is really, really important. And I'm glad that the Climate Action Plan recognizes this through the reference to the FireWise guidelines. The other design guidelines, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, are also referred to as ignition resistant construction. And we kind of had this start-stop earlier last year where the state adopted the Wildland Urban Interface Code statewide, and then they backed off of that. Well, right now there's a movement afoot again at the state to adopt those requirements statewide. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a few minutes. Next slide, please. I know this is hard to read on the slides, but I'll just kind of cover it in general. So with respect to Firewise, Firewise is a program that addresses a number of things. It can be maintenance related items like make sure you're cleaning out your gutters so you don't have pine needles and leaves and debris in your gutters, which is a place where embers can get in and ignite those materials and start roof on fire. It also involves what we'll call true defensible space, and that is trying to create a buffer of sporadic vegetation and the right kinds of vegetation that might be less prone to burn intensely. That's also incorporated in some of these Firewise guidelines. So there's 3 zones. You may have noticed on a earlier slide, there's a picture of a house and a little bit of a bullseye going out. So the immediate zone, which is what this slide reflects, is from the house itself to 5 feet away from the house. We're talking this far. That's a critical area with respect to making sure that we're not having direct flame impingement from combustibles onto the home. So in fact, I was just reading an article earlier today from someone I know that works in LA, that the state of California is considering passing a law that you can't have any combustibles within 5 feet because at the Eaton fire, they lost 6,000 homes. That was a direct contributing factor to the loss of property. So what we need to see in this matrix, and shout out to the city's arborist for reviewing this again for us since he's come on board and providing some updates. What we're looking for on this is everything should be green on this slide, especially this slide. If we're going to focus on anything as it pertains to defensible space, we need to get all these areas green. Green means that a homeowner is able to do that work within 5 feet of their home to make sure that we address those things within the immediate zone. And those things that you see listed there that aren't green are small flammable shrubs and plants in shoreline areas, critical areas, and ARPA areas. And then also being able to trim tree limbs that overhang into this zone. And that can be an issue across the board, just to trim branches, not cut down trees, just to trim branches. So if we want to call these diagrams report cards on how we're doing with respect to meeting the goal in the climate action plan, green is good. It means we're passing. If it's other than green or blue, blue is also technically passing. If it's not green or blue, it means that we're falling short of meeting some of those things. Next slide, please. You can see as we get further out from the home, it becomes more difficult for homeowners to be able to do Firewise related things, to be able to provide some level of protection from their homes. So again, one of the things I would hope that we're able to look at sooner rather than later, working with city staff and the fire department, are looking at ways where we can enable homeowners to be able to do some of these things without lots and lots of hoops. I totally understand and have preached a long time about the balance between doing nothing and making a parking lot. And the answer is somewhere in the middle. to there. And Firewise tries to help strike that balance, because I know there's a lot of competing priorities when it comes to trees and vegetation and protecting critical areas. I'm not naive to think that it's not a difficult discussion, but I think there's ways that we can make some mutual progress here. And then the last zone is the extended zone. It's on the next slide. That's 30 to 100 feet away. And again, it gets a little bit harder as you get further away. And remember, the idea of the sliding scale away from the home is we're trying to take the oomph out of the fire to be able to give that home a fighting chance, to give the firefighters a fighting chance to be able to protect that property. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, there's three main areas. We've talked a lot about the defensible space piece already, and the need to allow homeowners to be able to do some of these things to protect their homes and their property, at the same time balancing some natural resources protection that's also vitally important on the island as well. In the middle there, I had mentioned earlier about this notion of existing ignition-resistant construction. So this has to do with construction materials. And in the adopted fire code on the island, council's already approved a step in the right direction on this, and this is with respect to roof coverings. So roof coverings right now have to meet the requirements of the Wildland Urban Interface Code. So you can't just have cedar shake roofs. They have to be treated cedar shake roofs if you want to do that, and there's requirements that go along with that. There's more components of ignition resistant construction that we haven't yet adopted, such as I'll use an example for siding, hardy plank siding, or some type of ignition resistant siding, decking materials, how wooden fences connect to the home, screening, mesh screening on roof vents. Because you have to, in all of these things, I always like to say, it's not the big fire front that's burning things down. It starts with an ember. And when we have these conflagrations, it usually involves wind, and wind is blowing embers all over the place. So if you think like an ember, where's an ember going to be able to get and set something on fire? It could be deck furniture that's left out. It could be debris in your gutters. You know, those are easy things to work to mitigate. There's some other things too that can be used to built into the construction of buildings as well that we should be looking at. In the end, we may not have a choice. It might be adopted by the state, and we'll have to go down that road, but it's something that we should certainly also be looking at. And then lastly is water supply. Only 50% of the island has fire hydrant coverage, about 50%. I can say that the lack of available hydrants on the island is a contributing factor to some of the fire loss that we've had. I think a perfect example is the 2-alarm fire at a residence we had at Hidden Heights shortly after the first of the year. There's no fire hydrants anywhere close. It takes extra people away from fighting the fire, extra apparatus and extra time for us to be able to use water tenders to fill and shuttle water. We're set up to do that, but it makes things a lot less efficient fighting the fire, and we ran out of water on a number of occasions as we were getting that tender shuttle set up because we had so much fire involved. So one of the things going way, way back to when I first came here as the fire marshal in 2006 was trying to get purveyors together to be able to share information so that we can map out what the coverage looks like, what areas we have covered, what areas have infrastructure that support hydrants but don't have hydrants installed to be able to infill, and then what areas we don't have infrastructure so we can start doing a more robust fire protection water supply master plan, for lack of a better term, to be able to find out how we can increase fire hydrant coverage on the island. again, to be able to address the overall risk and issue has to be a multi-pronged approach. Can't put all the eggs in the fire hydrant basket and ignore everything else. We have to find some kind of balanced way to do this. And I think working together, we can come up with a plan and come up with some solutions that helps balance conflicting priorities and the varying needs that we all have. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Mayor Matthews, and then Councilmember Dietz and Councilmember Benfroy Johnson down the line.
Thank you so much, Chief. Great to see you. This presentation hits home for me. My house burnt down in 1997, burnt to the ground. And so I've seen fire and what it can do. I wonder specifically how we work with you to get this done as soon as possible on defensible space. And I also wonder, are there any jurisdictions who are doing this right now, who you can look to the code and say, hey, this is a jurisdiction who's figured out how to find that perfect balance. And here's how they addressed it, how it's reflected in their code. Just for us to, yeah, that was it. And then I think the rest of it is just outreach and education. The more we can do with that.
Absolutely. So the first part of your question, we have a great working relationship with the city, the fire marshal's office out of the fire department, and planning and community development. We've worked great in the past on some of these issues. It's not that we haven't made progress. If we looked 2, 3, 4 years ago, these charts had a lot less green on them. So that's a testament to the working relationship that we have with city staff, as well as the support of council as we've tried to take this measured approach, kind of a crawl, walk, run approach, maybe as we've tried to work our way into some of these issues. So I'm quite confident that the fire department, the city can work together to bring solutions forward to council that would, I hope, be acceptable and be able to balance some of the priorities, whether it's protection of vegetation, whether it's water availability, and some of the things that council is looking at with respect to water resources on the island. I think I don't remember your second part to your question, but the third part is, yeah, we continue to work on outreach. The fire department offers home or neighborhood assessments.
Yes.
We recently got a grant from the Department of Natural Resources to do our annual, we call it our Firewise Cleanup Day, the first weekend in May. So we'll be able to use those grant funds for bringing dumpsters into neighborhoods so that folks can bring their vegetation there, and then we get that off and get all that recycled and back into circulation. So we continue to do a number of those things with respect to public outreach. And yours was that? Okay.
You're like,
Oh, thank you, Jared. Thanks.
Perfect.
Councilmember Dietz.
oh, yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good to see you, Chief. Thanks for coming. We've been looking forward to having you here. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the dumpster diving project. I can't remember what we call it, but because my neighborhood got the benefit of that last year, and I think that might have been the inaugural year of this. And so just so folks know, a dumpster arrived in the neighborhood, and we had like 3-4 days to just load it up and just have at it. And so just removed just an absolute ton of debris underneath, certainly in our house. So thank you. Glad to hear. That was going to be one of my questions. Are you going to do that again? It sounds like yes. So that is great. I just wanted to say, after the California wildfires, my daughter goes to school in Los Angeles, so kind of got firsthand feel for that. I think they and we need to change our relationship to fire. the idea, the thinking that the fire department will just come and save your house, I think we have to dispel that. That is not going to happen if you're not set up for a safe environment and, you know, how the defensible space, how your house is built. So I think we need to change our relationship with fire is sort of my message, to think, yes, you know, Bainbridge Fire Department is great, but as you said, you know, there was water issues and a house that sound like may not have been saved because of that. So, but anyway, thanks for coming, and I look forward to further discussions.
Thank you.
Councilmember Van Troy Johnson.
Yes, thank you for coming. I wanted to ask you about the fire hydrants. I know in my neighborhood, every so often someone comes by and make sure that it's working. And I guess my thought was that we know where all of these fire hydrants are because they're coming to check. And then if that's the case, when you go to a house, do you already know there's not a hydrant? So you're already prepared to load the water and
Sure.
and do all those things that's necessary. And I guess when I first moved here, I heard a lot about, you know, it rains here all the time. We could never burn down like that. And I know that with climate change, we've had some really tough seasons where you know, the trees looked like they were sick themselves because it was so dry. So I imagine that the way we look at where we live and how we live needs to be, you know, we need to incorporate the climate change that's happening. I had a question for you in there.
Well, I'll
No,
buy
but
you some time and I'll answer your fire hydrant question
Okay.
first. And then if you remember the other question, then we'll tee that up. So with respect to hydrant, so the fire department has mapping of all of the fire hydrants on the island. That mapping automatically gets uploaded into mobile computer terminals in the apparatus. So when we respond, call information comes up, we have mapping available, so we can see where those hydrants are. The crews are also very good about knowing what areas of the island have hydrant coverage, even if they don't know exactly where that hydrant is in front of a particular house. We have a pretty good idea of, are we going to need tenders for this area or are we not? And then we can use that onboard mapping that we have to get us dialed in. As we have time available, the fire crews will go out and we'll spin hydrants and we'll check hydrants and we'll try to clear things. But that's as we have time available. We ran a record number of calls on the island last year, 3,913 calls on the island. 68% of those were EMS, the rest were fire or other types of emergencies. So we can also get spread out between that and training. Sometimes the extra time that we have to do those things can be challenging. Ultimately, the water purveyors statutorily are required to maintain their systems, but the history of the fire department here is we've always tried to get out and check hydrants when we have some staff available, but it becomes trickier and trickier as we get busier and busier. So
I remember.
great, perfect. So I hope that answers your question on
Yeah.
the hydrants.
It did. And I guess for us, like we have a well, right? And when there are people who don't have hydrants, can they tap into the city for their hydrant? Or I guess I'm just wondering how that works.
It depends. So there's water service areas that are mapped out on the island that are already predefined. Like for the city, they have a certain water service availability area where they can extend infrastructure into, where they might not already have pipes in the ground. So the island is divided up amongst a lot of different water purveyors in that way. So It really depends. Right now, typically how infrastructure gets extended most often is development has to pay its way. So if a new house is going in, they may have to extend water lines to get there if they're close enough. There's also exceptions where they can stay on wells because it might be an exorbitant cost to be able to get there. There's other ways to extend infrastructure. There might be a project where a water purveyor is wanting to extend service and offer that within their service availability area. Or like in the case of the neighborhood where I live, we were on a 16 house well and we wanted to get out of the water management business in our little water association. So KPUD was looking to make some extensions and we were actually able to hop in on a grant and buy in with KPUD, and they had new water mains. We had hydrants. We didn't have hydrants before. And we were able to get some grants from the state that offset some of that capital infrastructure cost to be able to get us on a KPUD system. So there's some various options that are available. It's not a one size fits all. It kind of depends on the individual situation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Morawaki and then Councilmember Hytopoulos.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Whitson. To continue that conversation. So we have a lot of rural areas, farmland, and all of these often wonderful waterfront homes that are down some road that I can't go down and look at them. So they're narrow. I have a lot of friends that do that. So one, when you go to those areas, are you using pumper or tanker trucks to get down there if there's a fire? And is it difficult with some of these driveways I go down? I don't have a very big car. So how does this, it must be frustrating or difficult for you to deal with these situations.
It can be extremely challenging. So essentially our private driveway standard right now for a driveway down to the waterfront that could have multiple homes, it's a 12-foot wide standard. So to put that in perspective, our trucks, fire trucks, not counting the mirrors, are 8 feet wide. So it gives us, now we got mirrors. If we have to park, we still have to get out. We have to be able to get equipment out, stretch hoses off the trucks. So it can be really, really challenging, especially on a dark and stormy night, to be able to navigate those. And it's not uncommon for us to damage apparatus to try to get to homes where those driveways, that clear width is not maintained, and height as well. The fire code requires 13 foot 6 inches overhead clearance. So we're not ripping off antennas or ladder racks or those kind of things. So it is very, very challenging in some areas to be able to get to homes. So, but we do it. So in a scenario like a waterfront home, and let's say there is a 800-foot long driveway to get from the main road down to the home, we will stop at the head of the driveway off the main road. We will pull hose off the back of the truck and drop it. And then we'll lay what we call a driveway supply. It's a 4-inch diameter hose. It's almost like a portable water main. And then we will drive down the driveway, laying that dry hose on the ground because we need all of the attack hose and equipment closer to the building. And then as other rigs come, they will come, slide the hose maybe over to the side or straddle it to go down to get more apparatus closer. And then once the tenders show up, they will connect to the hose on the main road so that they can do laps to get to the nearest hydrant, fill the tender, and our tenders carry 3,000 gallons of water. But our hose lines, our smaller hose lines, we're going to throw 175 gallons per minute of water to try to knock the heat out of that fire and extinguish it. So we have had operational plans to be able to address these things, but I'm glad you mentioned the access side of things, because access can be challenging. The fire commissioners voted a couple years ago to acquire what we call a Type 3 engine. It's a little bit smaller. It's not technically designed for structural firefighting, but it's a four-wheel drive fire engine. It's actually called a wildland urban interface engine. And we had it customized to have structural firefighting equipment. And we acquired that apparatus for a couple of reasons. One of which is if we have a drive access that's less than ideal, or we can't get one of our regular, what we call Type 1 structural engines down, we'll have that apparatus available, and we expect to take delivery of that in May of this year. That'll also be a great backup for structural protection for any type of wildfire events that we have on the island as well. So I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, but we do have access challenges.
Yeah, a couple follow-ups on that. Assume these are private driveways, they're not public right of way, so you can't say this is a dedicated fire lane. But since you have these dimensional issues, including the 13-foot high, is there, I mean, how do we make sure that that's access to, is there a necessary, like a public safety, you must clear the limbs 13 feet up if you want to have an engine come? What are the solutions to make sure those things happen?
Yeah, great question. So we have some remedies available to us in the fire code where we have required access, where there's an expectation that there's maintenance. Now with the private driveways, that's a little trickier. And the way we've tended to approach that is through voluntary compliance. And generally speaking, if we go out and talk to homeowners and we say, we can't even get a medic unit down the driveway in its current condition, you know, they're usually pretty motivated to work with us to figure out how we can improve that situation. But it is a concern, and it is an issue. We're even on some public streets that have been around for a long time where they're not signed as fire lanes, but they don't meet any type of current road standard. And they're very, very narrow. They're not signed. And we've been dealing with a number of those here recently as well, working with city staff and public works to figure out how to address some of those existing, what I call existing non-conforming conditions, to make sure that you know, we can get emergency access when we need it, because we typically have one shot to do it. And I've been on incidents where we have had our constraints of geography. And yes, I'm the business of looking at worst case scenarios, and worst case scenarios are pretty worst case. That's why we've talked about things with respect to evacuation, like I call it the Dunkirk plan, and that's getting people directed to the shoreline and having citizen vessels assist, which is something that was happening in Hawaii a couple of years ago. And, although sometimes when I've mentioned that, I get a chuckle, it's like a real scenario that we have to work through, because we can't afford not to have a plan and consider what that looks like. So evacuation planning is definitely challenging with what we have, especially when we're trying to get people off and resources on. It's a pretty daunting thought of how that looks like if we have a serious fire. But to your point, the long game with respect to the comprehensive plan, I think the city council's foresight in ensuring that wildfire is part of the climate action plan is one of the examples of looking at the long game that we've been successful in. So city staff and some of the consultants that have been involved in the comprehensive plan, they have engaged us at the fire department. We've tried to be upfront with those types of things that we think as a fire department need to be considered. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
City Manager King.
Yes, I just wanted to offer a couple comments. Probably the one the council knows is that you'll be presented with some policy considerations probably in the reasonable near future. And those will be some, quite frankly, I think, tough decisions for you to make. The chief has already lined up what we're talking about in terms of defensible space, impediments to defensible space, what can we do, and should there be modifications made in our code with regard to defensible space. The other is building materials. The Uniform Building Code will probably be changing soon, or there will be dynamic tension between building materials and defensible space. For example, if there is fire fuels within 5 feet of a structure, will we require a higher fire rated wall than what we would normally require if there was not vegetative material there? That will increase housing costs. So as the council, as you ask questions, you need to keep in mind, my admonishment to you is you will be asked to weigh in on some of these items. And I'll just say from my observation, my short time here, I've heard the comment several times, Bainbridge Island doesn't need to worry about wildland fires because we're so green. From my perspective, this is the second island city I've been the manager for, and this is really one of the first cities that the fire department was not under the umbrella of the city council. I do think that Bainbridge Island is at risk of a catastrophic wildfire. You already mentioned the issue of evacuation off of an island. It would be very, very difficult. And I just, not to dismiss the Dunkirk plan, but pragmatically, it would be extremely difficult to evacuate Bainbridge Island in the event of a catastrophic wildfire. Therefore, we have to prevent that catastrophic wildfire from occurring. And that will be a policy consideration for the council to make, which will be place dynamic tension between your current position on vegetation, which equals, some people see vegetation, most fire people I know see fire fuels. So some people see trees, some people see the ability for fire. So this presentation is made to you to put you in the spot, to not place in the spot, but to advise you that you will be asked to consider some policy considerations with regard to probably defensible space. And also I'll just say, regardless of where we stand with defensible space now, we want to educate the public to the degree we can, what they can do. And it's already mentioned, we're talking about maybe a citywide flyer to encourage people to remove vegetation off their roof, out of their gutters, from underneath their decks, clean up excessive debris on their lawns now. Those are actions what people could take now to make the community safer.
Chief, wrapping up a very long seminar. It's been so informative and so motivating for me. What I hear in everything that you've said, amazing professionalism, and you're speaking for a very professional department as well. And you're clearly a man who loves his job. So you're serving the city very well, and I
Thank you.
greatly appreciate it. I feel I'm going to take advantage of the presence of our planning director in the front row here. There are things in the code that need to be recognized as great big gaps. There used to be a code chapter titled Land Clearing, and it was way out of date for what it was saying. It had nothing to do with risk reduction and firewise policies and that sort of thing. But we need a chapter that provides the basis for a clearing permit. There is no such thing as a clearing permit in the administrative manual. There is a clearing permit for the shoreline, and that's clearing very small areas. But clearing for a subdivision, there are rules within the subdivision chapter, but they're not firewise, and it doesn't cover as much ground as we need to have covered to encourage developers to do it right and to encourage homeowners to clear wisely. And also, at the same time, protect what is most worth protecting, not only the house, but the vegetation surrounding it. In your presentation, there were two places where a funny looking home site was there, totally unlike anything imaginable on Bainbridge Island. And we need to be reckoning with our terrain, reckoning with the forest, the fragmented but still very, very extensive forest cover that we value and we need to protect, but we've got to find the balance. And it's going to be an ongoing challenge that gives us a chance to really work closely with you professionals. So I thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more, Kirsten.
Yeah, well, just for the benefit of the public and ourselves and our city staff and our history. I mean, obviously, as we've gone away from the idea of clearing permits, we've also had an understanding of critical areas. And I just want to point out that as we make these difficult decisions, the difficult decision isn't just vistas and, whatever.
Mhm.
It's critical slopes, it's other critical areas that require, it's holding water on the land. So again, I mean, and I was going to say that earlier, but I don't want to say it sounds argumentative because this is so important and we have to do it. But it's a lot, but people's lives and structures are actually at stake as well when we're talking about clearing. So it's going to be hard work. And I just want to point that out.
Well, we have another item on the agenda, so thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have a presentation. This is a task that was accomplished. We want to bring it to the council's attention. It also is important terms related to public safety. And it's something that in terms, I think we can take some pride in the accomplishment of working our emergency plans to be prepared for something we hope that, again, just so we talk about catastrophic fires, something that we hope never happens. So now we have done the earth, now we're the fire, now we're in the water piece of emergency preparedness. And Ann Lesage will go ahead and make this presentation.
All right. Good evening, Council. Ann Lesage, Emergency Manager for the city. I'm joined tonight by Ethan Weller. He's the Tsunami Program Coordinator with Washington State Emergency Management. So we have a joint presentation tonight. So from one hazard to the next, we're going to talk a little bit about the Tsunami Maritime Response and Mitigation Strategy that was under development for about 6 months of last year. And so we're going to give you a little bit of recap of that project and some next steps. So with that, next slide, please. So just to remind you a little bit about the background. So back in July 2022, there was new modeling release that showed a little bit of a shift in our understanding of the tsunami risk to Bainbridge Island. So looking at the Seattle fault and what that earthquake might produce for the island was a tsunami that is quite impactful to the east side of our lovely island. And so during that time frame, we were looking at the studies, the modeling that was released from the state, and we made a decision to take that seriously, as we do with all hazards that come our way, and move forward with understanding what we can do to better prepare our community for storm events and for tsunamis. And so with that, we move forward with the National Weather Service and the state to go through the Tsunami Ready program and the Storm Ready program. So it's a series of steps that we took as an agency to work with our community, look at our comprehensive emergency management plan, and understand what are the steps that we can do to better prepare our community. So with that, we received our Storm Ready designation in March of 2023, and then we received our Tsunami Ready designation in December of 2023. At that time, we are or were, and I think maybe still are, the first city along the inner coast of Washington that is tsunami ready. And so the state came along and said, hey, Bainbridge Island, would you like to work with us on a project to better understand the risk of this Seattle fault-based earthquake and tsunami and what that might look like for Eagle Harbor? So with that, we embarked on this process to put together a work group and really understand what that looks like for Bainbridge Island. Next slide. So what we started with was a series of weekly and then bi-weekly meetings. It was myself, Officer Bingham, our Marine officer at Bainbridge Island Police Department, Ethan and some of his colleagues at State Department of Emergency Management, and then the Washington Geologic Survey. So we met and had these conversations around what does this modeling look like? What are the things that we're already doing that were a part of our Storm Ready and Tsunami Ready process? And then where are some potential opportunities for us to continue to prepare our community, work with different agencies and organizations across the city, and just figure out where are we at, where do we need to go? So we hosted 2 workshops. One was in August of last year, and it was focused on emergency response. And then our second workshop was in October of last year, focused on mitigation. We had really great participation from our partners, as we normally are able to include people from the community, but also folks that were off island as well. So we had Bainbridge Prepares, the fire department, the Washington Department of Transportation, and the Washington State Ferries. This was a really key component of our plan because we need to continue to work with them related to the impacts, not only to the ferry terminal, but the ferry maintenance terminal. So the staff that are working on our island that could potentially be impacted if their facility was to get hit, because it is in the inundation zone. So we had really great participation. And with that, there was a series of these meetings that we had to basically put forward this written strategy for Eagle Harbor. And so in December, we published this strategy. It's a really incredible document that highlights all of the different things that we need to know for Bainbridge Island. So there's really high resolution modeling. The University of Washington also put together some additional models for us to look at that shows the movement of vessels in Eagle Harbor in relation to, the tsunami waves, in relation to kind of timing of when that wave first hits Bainbridge Island. And so being able to see that and really have this higher resolution modeling to understand, okay, you heard earlier Chief Moravec talking a little bit about our flotilla. And so those boat owners are a key part of our emergency response. But what does that look like after a tsunami? What does that look like when the waterways are damaged? There's maritime infrastructure impacts. That resource is not so much a resource in those first few days following a tsunami. So being able to understand that majority of the vessels on the flotilla are in Eagle Harbor. So that took us, a separate opportunity to look at our flotilla and say, well, if we have the tsunami and it's taken out 80% of our vessels, what are we left with? So what does that look like as part of that process? So lots of really great conversation, a lot of understanding between all of our different agencies that were here. What is the city doing? What is Public Works responsibility? What is the police department doing? What are the elements that impact Kitsap Transit and Washington State Department of Transportation and the school district and, so on and so forth. So it was a really concerted effort to figure out all of the things that we're doing right and then all of the things that we can do to continue our efforts moving forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ethan to go through a few slides that really dive into the modeling and the impact to Bainbridge related to Seattle Fault.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. So one of the main deliverables of this project comes from the site-specific maps and models. This is something that DNR works on as a requirement for their project, DNR's Department of Natural Resources. So we were able to, once we identified the study area, which are represented in the maps on the bottom side of the screen, we were able to put in simulated points or simulated tide gauges at strategic locations within Eagle Harbor. So some of those points were the city dock, the maintenance terminal for the Washington State ferries, and then we also just have some general points out in the open water at the mouth of the harbor as well. They are scattered throughout the study area itself. We did take a look, in addition to the Seattle fault generated tsunami, we're also able to take a look at modeling from the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake and tsunami as well. So the maps that you see on the screen there, we're able to create 3 different kinds of maps. So on the bottom left, that is the maximum inundation for the Cascadia subduction zone. Inundation is that on-land flooding, or to make it simple, just places that are usually dry that are now wet. Additionally, we also are able to take a look at drawdown, or what are referred to as minimum water depths. That's that middle map there. You can see that the very light blue colors are water depths of 0 to 3 feet. And then we're also able to take a look at the maximum current speeds as well. So the darker orange, sometimes moving into purple in the bottom right, you'll see our current speeds exceeding anywhere between 6 to 9 knots over background current speeds. So we're able to develop those maps for the larger study area as well. And then you may also notice the yellow squares on those maps. We do have separate maps that have a zoomed in look at those specifically for those 2 areas as well. In addition, because those do represent the maximum and minimum, kind of the extremes of the impacts of the tsunami, we're also able to take a look at the graph in the top right. So we're able to take a look at those water level changes throughout the tsunami threat for both scenarios, and then the current speeds and how those fluctuate as well throughout the event. Next slide, please. So part of the reason, and I think Anne really nailed this home, but to drive it home even further, is the release of Seattle fault modeling in 2022 from DNR was one of the main reasons that we selected Bainbridge Island as our site for this strategy. That paired with the ongoing work that Anne has done for tsunami preparedness really led us to choose Bainbridge Island as the site for the project. From the Seattle fault itself, we used a magnitude 7.5 earthquake on the Seattle fault, which runs right through Bainbridge Island. And from the tsunami generated from that earthquake itself, you can see wave arrival in approximately 3 minutes from the start of the earthquake. The primary impacts are on the east side of the island because that is where the thrust of the earthquake is itself. But you can see the numbers on the screen there represent anywhere from about a dozen feet of inundation. Again, that's that on-land flooding, all the way up to a few dozen feet of inundation in certain areas along Bainbridge Island. Next slide, please. Another big portion of the project itself is taking a look at specific tsunami response and mitigation actions. So these are actions that are both used at the national level and then internationally as well. The national level comes from the National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program, which is a NOAA-funded project. So on the tsunami response side of things, we are able to have these discussions with Ann and the other stakeholders that she brings to the table to discuss the feasibility of 17 different response actions. I kind of bucketed those just into some more high level buckets. So that would be notification processes in coordination with other local first responders. Actions to protect maritime assets. So that could be just making sure that boats are tied up properly to maritime infrastructure, evacuation away from low-lying areas and ensuring that people stay away from the water for the threat of a tsunami. And then also what I just label as emergency management functions. So those can be activating mutual aid agreements or activating incident command, basically local response at the assembly areas from evacuation. Some of the highlights from our discussions as part of this work, one of the great things that came out of this is from Ann's work on storm surges and king tides. We were able to use some of her lessons learned from pre-staging emergency equipment and how that would apply to tsunami response. We were also able to have conversations with the Bainbridge Prepares Flotilla Group and be able to determine what their role would actually look like in tsunami response and what's realistic. And we were able to utilize some existing plans as well, one of those being the wildfire evacuation plan as a baseline for some of these evacuation discussions. On the mitigation side of things, we took a look at 15 specific actions, and we also outlined potential funding sources for future projects. One of those, the buckets for those include maritime infrastructure upgrades and assets, installing tsunami signage, and then what I referred to as large infrastructure projects. Those are typically actions such as building floodgates or breakwaters, other pretty significant maritime infrastructure projects. Some of the highlights from that, we were actually able to create a new category for the feasibility for mitigation actions, and that was labeling actions as complete. And that comes from the 2019 City Dock infrastructure upgrades. The planning that went into that, we actually found was really beneficial to tsunami mitigation. Additionally, the large infrastructure projects that we were able to have a discussion about are limited by the presence of the Wyckoff Eagle Harbor Superfund site. And then there is just a general emphasis, whether the projects are small or large, on coordination with partners for these feasible projects. Thank you.
Next slide. There we go. All right. So as Ethan mentioned, in looking at those different response and mitigation strategies, right, there's a lot of things that we were already doing. There were things that have already been a part of our Bainbridge Prepares partnership, the efforts that we're doing to help our community be prepared for all hazards. And there were some actions that were in place as a part of the Tsunami Ready process. So one of those was related to tsunami signs. So I'll talk about that in a moment. The city dock infrastructure upgrades that Ethan mentioned, and our flotilla. So having those things already in place made us that much further along in terms of things that we can do to be prepared. I think similar to the conversation around wildfire preparedness, you know, due to the rapid nature of these incidents, things that we can do ahead of time make us that much more prepared to respond when something happens. So things that we can do to prepare and mitigate, whether it's wildfire, whether it's tsunami, earthquake, winter storm, power outage, whatever it is, everything that we're doing pre-event, what we call our blue sky days, helps us so that when something happens, we're that much more prepared. We have resources, we have staff trained, we have volunteers, we know what our response plans are, and it makes that process go much smoother. Next slide. So in terms of the tsunami signage, this was a big part of our Tsunami Ready review process. There were just a handful of signs on Bainbridge. And this related back to what we know about the Cascadia fault, and Ethan showed some of that modeling. You know, there certainly were some areas of impact on Bainbridge, but the extent of what we know now about Seattle caused us to look at where are all the places that we're missing? And so that first part of Tsunami Ready, we created a series of maps for the whole island. And so if you go to the city website, you go to the GIS page where all of our maps exist, we have those tsunami maps that show every neighborhood on Bainbridge and what those potential inundation zones look like. And so next slide shows all of the signs that we have now added. So, and what we had previously was just that tsunami hazard zone sign that's right in the middle. We added assembly area signs, entering and leaving tsunami zone signs, and then a couple more of those tsunami hazard zone signage. So hopefully folks are driving around the island, noticing that and thinking about what that means. And then we've also done targeted outreach to the neighborhoods that are in those inundation zones. Next slide, please. So what now? Some key recommendations that came from, this strategy. We want to develop some targeted outreach and education to boat owners and to our liveaboards. So our liveaboard community, individuals that live on their boats, either part-time or full-time, they're particularly vulnerable to a tsunami. And so we're working on some targeted outreach for that sector of our community. We want to make sure that we're addressing their concerns and making sure that they're informed about the risk. We also are looking to purchase some additional, PFDs, some additional life vests for Marine 8, so that we are able to, help and bring more people on board, so that we have extra life vests on hand. Kind of that same goal for all of the flotilla owners. So all the boat owners that are part of our flotilla, we want to encourage them to have extra life jackets on board as well. So especially if they're helping evacuate, helping with other emergency response initiatives, that they have life vests on board for individuals in our community. And then just to continue to build our partnership. Washington State Department of Transportation, the ferry system, they are a key partner, and we want to continue to work with them to understand the impacts, in particular to the ferry maintenance terminal. We know that there are staff that, are on site that would be impacted. And so we need to find a way to come together and help them solidify their plan for those staff and what that looks like. And just to continue the Tsunami Ready outreach that we have done using our mapped neighborhoods through our Map Your Neighborhood program, we continue to push information out through our City Connects newsletter, and through all of our different partnerships that we have. We want to continue to focus on tsunami preparedness. Next slide. So a couple other things that we're working on over the next year. Number one is, along with the city website updates, I'm taking a really hard look at all of our emergency management pages. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of work that we do, but frankly, it's kind of hard to look at. It's kind of hard to find what you're looking for. And so we want to create a tsunami specific page. And then we're going to develop a QR code with a sticker that goes on all of those tsunami signs, so that people who see it can just scan it. It'll take you right to the city Tsunami Ready page and give you all the information you need to know about tsunami preparedness and response. And I mentioned the outreach to our neighborhoods that are in the inundation zone and to our liveaboard community, and then to continue to evaluate the placement of our signs. We feel like there's a few spots where we're missing some signage. So the state has been wonderful in partnering with us to get us the signs that we need, and to, our public works folks helps us get those posted. So shout out to Jason Roger, who's been amazing at helping us get all of our tsunami signs up. So with that, next slide. That's the information that I wanted to share with you tonight. This has been a really great project that we feel really lucky to have been able to work with the state and publish this report that has now been, press released back in December. It's out for community members to read, and that's all. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Councilmember Moravec.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, and thanks for your tsunami work. This is like my second nightmare tonight. The evacuation idea to get off the island, people can't get off the island in time every damn afternoon. So I don't know how, and if that light's red, this flotilla better work, man. So I'm looking at the map and I'm just going through it. So if I understand this, Fay, Bainbridge, and Point Monroe are toast. Manitou Beach, the shipyard, Upper Eagle Harbor, part of Pritchard Park, Wing Point. They're pretty much hit and would be damaged if not totally gone. Is that how I'm reading that map?
Yes.
Okay, that nightmare continues. No, but thanks for the work, and I think these signs are really helpful. I've noticed them myself around the island, so I think people know if that happens. I like the earthquake. Earthquake, tsunami, go to higher ground. It's a very simple direction. So I hope people follow this, and I really hope our flotilla works too.
I'll call on you next.
Thank you.
Mayor Matthews.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thank you so much, Ann, and thank you, Ethan, for your presentations. I went to the open house on Friday at the Kitsap County Operations Center Emergency Management, and I was blown away by all of the positive comments about you. So thank you so much for being here with us and all you do for our city, because we're really lucky. I drove away thinking, wow, we have like a rock star in Ann. So thanks a lot. I was thinking, I grew up in New York as a kid, and they used to have these commercials. It was like, it's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your child is? Or something like that. And I know that we don't have money for television ads and that sort of thing, but it would be so cool if we could have this sort of model out, or even in the, I don't know if the review, those electronic display ad things, but showing folks so they can see a graphic of what's going to happen and like how the actual modeling looks. Because I think folks just don't think that this could happen here, the reality of it. And so I think we have to be really direct and show them somehow. So I don't know how we're going to do it, but they need to see this and they need to see it moving in motion somehow. But anyway, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Antroy Johnson.
Thank you for your presentation, both of you. My first question is about the Agate Pass, obviously, because that's where I live, on that side. And I can't really tell if it's going to be inundated or what's going to happen.
Yeah, so the modeling for the north and the west side of the island doesn't show a whole lot of inundation. So I could email you and kind of zoom in on your neighborhood, but if you go to the map that we have on the city website, you can zoom in. And now, mind you, this is just one model, right? So it's based off of the 7.5 on Seattle. We have Cascadia modeling as well. So it's kind of the worst case scenario for inundation, but it's also based off of mean higher high water, right? So if we have a tsunami, the earthquake hits, and we have the tsunami when it's king tides, it'll be much worse.
Yes.
If we have the earthquake and tsunami during low tide, it'll be a little better. So it's just one model. And so there certainly are variations to what that inundation would look like. But for both Cascadia and Seattle Fault, there is less of an impact to the north end, minus Point Monroe and Fay Bainbridge. Sorry. And then to the west side of the island. Yeah, the east side really does take the brunt of it.
Okay, so if I'm in Eagle Harbor, where are these assembly areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have those mapped out
City Hall.
on the map. The best thing to do wherever you are at on the island, right? As Councilmember Morawaki said, like if you are feeling the shaking, we of course want to do the drop cover, hold on, protect our head and neck, wait for the shaking to stop, but then immediately get to high ground. And so we have a few areas that are called out. We have some signs for like Pritchard Park. We have some signs up at Waterfront Park. We have Holly Cove. So there are assembly areas noted on that map that show you exactly how far up you need to go. But the faster and, as far up as you can get, the better. And because we have that, 3 to 4 minutes worth of notice for the first wave, we're just telling everyone, assume every earthquake is capable of generating a tsunami, right? And if you've gotten to high ground and 10 minutes have gone by and the harbor looks great, well, then it probably either wasn't Seattle Fault or it wasn't big enough to generate a tsunami. So because we have that limited time to respond, we just have to assume and get to high ground as fast as possible.
3 minutes is not a long time. It is not a long time. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Deeds.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good to see you, Ann, and thank you for coming and giving this invaluable information. Yeah, 3 minutes, it takes me that long to get my shoes on, so so yeah, good luck with a lot of this. But this is invaluable information. Like Manitou Beach, I used to live, did I see 32 feet? I mean, so where we're at, 32 feet, wow, that pretty much wipes out that neighborhood. Separate but related, the Emergency Operations Center, since you're here, do you know when that's going to be ready?
Yes, good question. We are actively working on finishing out the build out. So we are getting closer. There are a few pieces that remain, some electrical work that needs to get done in the building, and then we can do the antenna installs. So we are getting closer. Right now, we're sort of at the mercy of getting some contracts out for the electricians to do some wrap up work, but we are making really great progress, and we will have more news to share soon.
We have a tentative schedule to invite the council to an open house and at the EOC, generally the week of May 20th.
Okay.
So that we would look to have a special council meeting to invite the council to tour the EOC. And also we want to review probably our all hazards comprehensive emergency management plan at that time. So May 20th is the target date. So we want to say it out loud so that everybody knows that's our deadline date.
Yeah, excellent. Great, glad. And again, thank you for everything you do. This is invaluable. It's a bit scary, but we need to be aware, and then we need to be prepared for that. So thank you.
I don't see other lights, but just my thanks as well. I'm on the west side now. I used to live off Sunrise Drive. And I just think the chaos is going to come later to the west side. And I'm not that far from Seattle Fault, so wherever. I'm on high ground, but hard to get off that.
Yeah, there's still all the earthquake impacts to worry about, so you're not completely safe. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item, discussing use of low emission landscape tools, prohibition of certain small gas powered engines. Those are discussion topics, not for a decision tonight, but council is expected to provide some direction going forward.
Yes,
City
thank you,
Manager?
Deputy Mayor. I would like to engage the council in some collective policy discussion about the topic of gas-powered hand tools. This has been a conversation that's been rolling out for the last 2.5 years or so. Adam Nebsall is going to help me with this presentation. We have a little PowerPoint. But let me just, in terms of some background information, it was in July of 2022 that the City Council's advised the staff was changing approximately 30 pieces of small gas-powered equipment, 25 horsepower or less, used for vegetation management to electric hand tools. This had been identified in the 2018 greenhouse gas emissions inventory as it was estimated that small hand tools used for landscaping account for about 3% of the emissions from city's government operations. By June of 2023, the transition to electric hand tools substantially was completed. At this point in time, the only remaining gas-powered hand tool, the small variety, is a backpack blower that's on a reserve vehicle. And I was talking to the Public Works Director. He doesn't quite know why it's still there, other than it's on a reserve vehicle and there maybe wasn't any available but it's not being extensively used. So for the most part, the city has transitioned those 30 pieces of equipment to electric equipment. We estimate that we've reduced about 6,500 gallons of fuel consumption, and we have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by making this transition by about 3%. When we started off in 2022, we talked to the council about just verbally, like we're doing now, the possibility of looking at regulating gas-powered hand tools community-wide. We want to get done with the transition from the city first and then bring that back. A Possible ordinance was prepared and reviewed with two committees, the Race Equity Advisory Commission and the Climate Change Advisory Commission. They have provided some comments, and what we're going to represent tonight reflects some of those comments. So let's start with the PowerPoint, and we'll walk through this with you. What we hope we can do is we will have some component parts of what an ordinance would be. We want to talk about types of tools. We want to talk about enforcement. We talk about implementation, timing, and get some general direction from the council of what, if you do want to see an ordinance that would regulate small off-road engine gas-powered hand tools in Bainbridge Island. We want to talk the ordinance components, and we talk a little bit about mitigation offsets. But first of all, what is the issue? What is the problem, or is there a problem with gas-powered hand tools? The state legislature is considering legislation to prohibit the use statewide of gas-powered hand tools. Within the statement of facts prepared by the state legislature, here are some things they said. And I know you're not supposed to be reading PowerPoints, but I will go ahead and read some of these. Gasoline-powered and diesel-powered landscaping and other outdoor power equipment emit a host of air pollutants, including but not limited nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, and carbon dioxide. That's a significant greenhouse gas contributor. Air pollution contributes to climate change and negatively impact public health. Also from the state legislative findings, an EPA calculation shows gas-powered motors contributed 5% of the United States air pollution, and estimates indicate more than 17 million gallons of fuel, mostly gasoline, is spilled every year while refueling lawn equipment. When I was littler and was given the job in my teens of mowing the lawn, I thought I was the only one who was spilling gas. The U.S. Department of Transportation data shows that in 2018, Americans used nearly 3 billion gallons of gasoline running lawn and garden equipment, equivalent to the annual energy use of more than 3 million homes. And then there are some calculations here also from the state legislature. 1 hour of running a gas lawnmower can contribute as much smog, foreign pollution as driving a passenger car 300 miles. And what's even more interesting is 1 hour of running a gas leaf blower can contribute as much as smog, foreign pollution as driving a passenger car 1,100 miles. For grins, we wanted to see how far that would be. So that's equivalent of driving from Seattle to Santa Barbara, California. And that's 1 hour of running a backpack gas-powered leaf lawn blower. Here's an important thing to consider. Small gas engines used in lawn and garden equipment cause asthma, hearing loss, and other health issues, especially for the workers who regularly use them. And let's go to the next slide. We mentioned that in our case, in 2023, gas-powered vegetation management equipment accounted for 3% emission from city government operations and 6,500 gallons of fuel per year. We have transitioned from that, and so now we are using electric string trimmers, hedge clippers, pole saws, and large edgers. Something else too, this effort to restrict the use of gas-powered hand tools is being undertaken really among cities throughout the country. Cities in 26 states and the District of Columbia have restricted or prohibited the use of some type of gas-powered lawn tools. So this is really if you pardon the pun, a grassroots effort to restrict gas-powered hand tools. However, this movement is not embraced by everybody. There are 3 states that have actually enacted laws prohibiting local governments in their states from imposing bans on gas-powered equipment. You'll never guess what states those are. They are Florida, Ohio, and Texas, generally known as being climate denier states. What we're suggesting the council consider is somewhat consistent with other climate action tools and initiatives that the city has previously taken. For example, the heat pump program is spending about $260,000 for public education to subsidize approximately 10 heat pumps. The fleet vehicle electrification program identifies will take about $19.5 million to convert our vehicle fleet to electric. We are looking at electric vehicle charging facilities. The council has considered electric vehicle ready development standards. The home compostable disposal food serviceware ordinance also looks at climate issues. And we've recently approved about 500,000 for the Ted Spearman Justice Center carbon offset. So we present this to you within the context of what we're talking about is fairly consistent with other actions the city has taken. We now come down to where we stand specifically. When the ordinance was discussed with the CCAC or the REACT committee, you'll notice in their memorandum provided to the council, they felt a blanket restriction for tools under 25 horsepower was too aggressive and would not be accepted by the community. And so they made a recommendation that we look at specific tools and that it not be a blanket restriction. So the specific tools that we could talk about, and Adam's going to run these through specifically, for example, would be leaf blowers. I will say that it appears to be a consensus that gas-powered leaf blowers, again, contribute a significant amount of pollution and they make a lot of noise, and Adam's going to talk about that. Hedge trimmers, which we have converted to lawn edgers or string edgers, non-riding lawnmowers, and string trimmers. It seems that the non-riding lawnmowers, the push mowers, are deeply embedded within the community. And looking at, again, it'll be your policy decision, but that's something to consider. Probably the direction that I would suggest to council lean is that we look at leaf blowers, possibly hedge trimmers, and string trimmers to start off with there. We're going to go to the specific tools, and Adam has teed this up, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the specific tools.
Yep. Thank you, City Manager. As he mentioned briefly, I'll just display a list of the tools as well as provide a visual aid on the sound differences for either your entertainment or you really won't enjoy this. We'll see how you feel. But as the backpack leaf blower is the first, we are able to find a decibel test showing the difference between a backpack leaf blower that is engined versus one that is battery powered.
Okay, so we got our gas blower now. I'm going to idle it first. Clearly our loudest piece of equipment. Moving over, we have the Greenworks blower.
So that's just about a minute video, just showing that there is about a 20 decibel difference in between them. And for everyone's safety in their ears, we won't go through all the other tools. But I did want to highlight just the different tools that the city manager has briefly mentioned. So kind of in a way of going clockwise, we have hedge trimmers, which is in the top right corner. You have your lawn edgers, and then back up on the top left, you have your non-riding lawnmowers and your string trimmers. We do want to, as I mentioned, that the electric versions are all readily available at most Ace Hardwares or Home Depot or general repair stores like that. And they also all produce lower decibels compared to their gas powered counterparts. I'm going to hand it back to the city manager to discuss the ordinance components.
We have three component elements of this ordinance we'd like to have the council discuss. One is the tools. What tools should be restricted? We've already talked about that. The next component is enforcement options. The concerns raised by the CCAC and REACT was that this ordinance would disproportionately impact commercial landscapers that are oftentimes owned by and operated by minority businesses. The enforcement has been written in different ordinances in two different ways. Now, I will say, having gone through this ordinance before, it's very difficult to actually enforce this ordinance. And to be honest with you, the community has to be leaning into this ordinance to make it successful. In order to enforce the ordinance, the enforcement official has to actually see the tool being used that's subject to the enforcement. So in other words, it's not a matter of someone calling up and saying, my neighbor is using a backpack blower. The enforcement official has to actually see someone using the backpack blower. It would probably be an administrative citation. Administrative citation could be issued against the property owner. The thought there is that it's the property owner's responsibility to know what equipment is being used in their property. Even if it's a commercial landscaper, they should be in communication with the commercial landscaper, advising them what they can and cannot use. The other option, of course, is that the user of the equipment is subject to the citation. So those are two different ways that enforcement could be approached. Again, the thought that it's unfair to the commercial landscapers who may not know and the citation should not go against them. The alternative would be against the property owner who should take responsibility for what's being used in their property. The third component is the implementation. It's an important piece. We're suggesting 3 different times, and obviously there could be other times, but the effective date for the ordinance could be 12 months after its adoption. That's intended to give people time to amortize the replacement of equipment, information, consultation with the commercial landscapers. It could be a year and a half, or it could be 24 months. I'll just say from personal experience, the last time this ordinance was adopted, that council selected a 2-year period of time from the adoption to the effective date of the ordinance. That longer effective date, again, is intended to provide for time for the community to be aware of the ordinance, for people to change out equipment. And so that's an important piece of that. You've been asked to consult with the commercial landscaping community. A longer period of time would give that time to do that. An item that we would recommend and assume would not be in the ordinance, but would run parallel with the ordinance is mitigation and offset. And again, I'm going to ask Adam to talk a little bit about some options that we have for mitigation offsets. And this is to help mitigate the impact to users or people that have a difficult time complying with the ordinance. Again, it would not be part of the ordinance, but the expectation is that we would describe a program that would be adopted by resolution, and the council would see that and provide direction.
Yes. So as you look towards different ways that you can mitigate or offsets the effects of it, there are kind of 2 different variations or 2 different paths that you can go. It can be an and, it could be an or, it could be either or. So the first one would be kind of an equipment lending or a tool library. These are quite common in King County, in Seattle, and many other places around the country, even specifically on Bainbridge Island with Sustainable Bainbridge, where they have the lending library for table settings and other hosting utensils. So similar to that program, it could be run by a nonprofit. In Seattle and King County, many tend to be run by nonprofits. Or it could be a city-run program, as was put in your packet. Lafayette, California runs a city-run program where they have backpack blowers, electric ones that are based out of their community center where you can go and check it out for about a week. And those can provide and be as little as you pay a week for about $1 to $20 for that. Some models have a sustaining thing where you pay $65 for a year to be a part of this lending library service. So that really, the program is very varying, and it really just depends on what level of subsidy you want to put into the program, or as well as what level of involvement the city would have into that program. The second one, as we mentioned, is vouchers. So that is a program where individual will go to a participating dealer, for lack of a better term, or store, like an Ace Hardware, where they would go and purchase an electrical lawn equipment tool. So you go and buy your electric leaf blower. You take your gas-powered leaf blower and you drop it off at what would be the transfer station, the situation in Bainbridge Disposal. You would receive a receipt from Bainbridge Disposal. You would also keep the receipt from the voucher from Ace Hardware, from where you bought your backpack leaf blower. And then you would submit those receipts on a city website form. It would get verified by a member of city staff, and then a check would be sent in the mail to that resident with a rebate for having purchased the program. This has been quite commonly done in California. It has also been done in Kansas, in Wichita, Kansas, where the last city that I worked in. So it is varying throughout the program of working on those type of voucher systems. And then finally, the city is able to develop conceptual programs if the council desires moving forward after your discussion this evening.
So with that, Deputy Mayor would like some input from the council. Maybe start if this is an initiative the council wants to take on. If it is, let's three-component part. What tools, enforcement, and perhaps the effective date of the ordinance.
Councilmember Hytopoulos first and Mayor Matthews next.
Yeah, well, I think that leaf blowers are sort of a no-brainer starting point. And I want to think about adding anything else right away. There are a lot, well, I think it's supposed to be about 100 cities that are in the process of having banned or banning over gradual time leaf blowers. And as the city manager said, that idea that, you know, the community needs to lean into it for this to work. Leaf blowers are generally very disliked by many people for health reasons, noise reasons, et cetera. One thing I was curious about looking at was, I think I've heard in some places concerns that, you know, well, we're always hearing about these things from California, and California is drier, it doesn't have the leaves and the wet that we have and so forth. But you got to think about the fact that Burlington, Vermont has done this. They have the same amount of rain basically as Seattle. You've got Montclair, New Jersey, you know, Baltimore, Maryland, we got Portland, Oregon. But so anyway, I think that I'm absolutely on board with a phased in leaf blower restriction or prohibition. And I think that because we're also probably trying to start kind of set a stage, just like we first set the stage with us doing this. This is sort of the first thing that we would do. I think the 24 months might be a good way to do it. And it's a little bit long, but if we're as generous as we can be to help people make this transition. I like the idea of a lending library. I think the property owner should be responsible. And with the lending library, what I wonder, and of course, if it's us, we'll have more control over it, but it could also be part of our education as we move into other tools. I mean, if we have a certain number of the next tools that we might be thinking about doing, allowing people to have a chance to utilize electric tools and see how they work might be helpful in convincing people this is the right way to go. So I'm definitely on board with leaf blower ban. And I really appreciate, I guess one more thing I want to say is what's great about leaf blowers as the first one is there are multiple health issues. There's not just the gas, there's what leaf blowers blow, there's the noise. So I think that the poster child for this.
Mayor Matthews.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Mayor Councilmember Fantroy Johnson.
Thanks, City Manager, for working on this and bringing this to us. I think I agree with Councilmember Hytopoulos on the time limit. I think 24 months is good. I agree the backpack leaf blowers are a great starting point. If you watch them, I mean, the smoke and the stuff that is going around, one comes down Winslow to my door at work and I like shut the door and you smell it, you hear it. The electric ones didn't sound all that better. They were still annoying, but you know, I think let's start there, and the phased in approach is good. I also think it's good if we're going to have things in the lending library. It's one thing that we're working on at a time, as well as a buyback program. I was thinking also thinking about our service providers and the equity issue, but I also always think about our agricultural community because I live on the fringe of that and the equestrian community. And I just think of fields and folks with large parcels trying to navigate using electric mowers or some of the other items. I don't know if I would be supportive of, but I'm definitely supportive of the backpack blowers.
Councilmember Fantroy Johnson and then Councilmember Dietz and down there.
Yes, I think that the leaf blower is definitely a no-brainer, but I also think the other smaller tools, the lawn edger and the string trimmer, should be included. And as far as enforcement, I would hope that we could do some type of, you know, how do we, you know, get people to understand there has to be a leeway period before we start enforcing, right? We have to let them know that in 2 years, we're gonna start enforcing
Mhm.
And when we do, then I think it should be the property owners,
Mhm.
right? To let them know that you need to have someone who is doing your lawn using the type of electric tools that we've laid out. And I do believe the 24 months is a great period of time to get everybody started on.
Councilmember Schneider and then Councilmember Marawaki. Oh, I'm sorry. I said,
I'll-
Joe Deeds next.
I-
Sorry.
Am I next?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. It's okay. I'll go backwards. I think a lending library sounds like a great idea. And so they asked, there was that library for utensils and plates and stuff, which I have used for events. So gosh, we had that for tools. Because one thing I did an exercise of if I was to replace my hedge trimmer and my weed whacker and then get an electric leaf blower, it'd be like $1,000 just to go out and buy one. And I'll just say, I don't particularly feel like spending $1,000. So for this, so a lending library sounds like a great idea. Let's put the onus on the property owner because that will make it easier for education for one. When we tell people on the island, this is on you, you know, we're going to enforce this on you. 24 months, I think, is a good time period. So I'm backing up. So definitely leaf blowers. I think that, as I've heard, no brainer. I'll do a quick story. When we had our last cyclone here on the island, my next door neighbor, a yard crew came to their house, and right in the midst of this massive windstorm, they were using a gas powered leaf blower. Just defied explanation. You know, I mean, everything blowing, and then this guy's doing this. So anyway, electric gas powered leaf blowers, no brainer, and all those other things I mentioned. And yeah, let's move forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Schneider and then Councilmember Marawaki.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'm also in agreement about the leaf blower. I'd be happy to support some other small tools as well. I think that the 24-month period is reasonable. I just have a concern though. So for one, I'm grateful that the lending library for tableware was brought up. I actually returned a whole bunch of glass mugs and dessert plates and whatnot from a memorial that I was in charge of this weekend. And it's the second time in a 12-month period that I've used that lending library. And each time I go, I'm blown away. And my family was kind of blown away by what a resource it is. As far as tools go, I mean, I remember going to a tools library, 25 years ago when I lived near Finney Ridge, and Finney Ridge has an amazing tools library, or I haven't been there in ages, but they did. So I think I would like us to commit and getting a lending library going as soon as possible so that it can be the primary sort of educational front that we have for this. And then if we're going to do a rebate or a voucher program, we also need to get that going right away because otherwise nobody will be, first of all, we could create some negative feedback if people are going out and switching over because they know this is coming, and then we instigate, later on we instigate a voucher program. They're going to be annoyed that they missed an opportunity for that. So I think we need to be really clear from the get-go, are we going to do a voucher program or not? And if we are, let's get it going right away so that we don't get that negative feedback about missing an opportunity. But my preference would be to really focus on the lending library. Thanks.
Councilmember Marawaki.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Quitzel. It sounds like we're in some sort of consensus here. I'm agreeing to most of these things. I would go along with Councilmember Schneider and Fantler Johnson. I believe the other tools are also things that should be added to this. There are a couple of concerns about this lending library. I don't know I would like to know what the fiscal impact would be. How is that equipment acquired? How much that was going to cost? Is it going to be a situation where we buy new equipment and put the current equipment that had been used by our folks as part of that? That's a policy thing, but it's also a fiscal thing. And I also want to give a shout out to the Climate Change Advisory Committee and the Race Equity Advisory Committee. It's a very comprehensive memorandum. I had a couple questions about it. There was a lot of issues concerned about minority communities and people of color having. I just wondered if there's making some statements, but there's no mention that there's been any reach out to these communities to actually get those thoughts. And it's an assumption or maybe common knowledge. I don't know, but there's statements that apparently don't have any kind of background on it. And it appears that they didn't, because some of the recommendations are to do that outreach. It says on the table, it should go out and talk to the community, et cetera, et cetera. And that's wise. I think that would have been good to do before we start talking about this, so we have a good lay of the ground of what be impacted. And then just some data points that really struck me in that presentation. It was 85 dB at loudest for the electric, but the gas one was 102, something like that. Well, that I'm looking at the meter, and that's around right here. It says that's about a nightclub or sporting event in a very loud, dangerous level over 30 minutes. I did another quick math. 1 hour on a leaf blower, a car driving 1,000 miles, not only getting to California. If you went 60 miles an hour to cover 1,100 miles, that's 18.3 hours. Now imagine someone having to sit behind a car for 18.3 hours to get the same kind of pollution of one leaf blower. And I'm raising that because, we talk a lot about equity and such, but there's environmental justice. And one of the reasons why that's important is that over time, it's been known over and over that undesirable land use areas near factories or near a freeway or other polluted areas, that's where a lot of marginalized communities have to end up living, because it's the only place they can afford and or that they zone. And that's an environmental justice issue. And that wasn't really brought up in the memorandum. And the environmental justice is these individuals are breathing toxic levels of which we can't imagine. And leaf blowers are even more poisonous because it's not just gasoline. They also had oil to make these devices work. So now you already have gasoline and you're throwing in a more toxic formula with oil to burn inside these machines. So it's a dangerous concoction, and that should really be one of our primary concerns, because these people I just did this, and I'm talking about racial stereotypes. I'm an Asian that's not really good at math, but I did something to figure this out, and just follow me with this. The gas consumption, and I went to this place called leafblower.com, and there's 2-stroke engine, 4-stroke engine, the amount of power, the time used, et cetera. But generally the caveats are this. A fair estimate that these leaf blowers use about 1/10 to 3/10 of a gallon per hour, 1/10 to 3/10. So for my easy math, I went with 0.25, that's a quarter. So if you have a quarter a gallon per hour in an 8-hour workday, let's conservatively say that they only use that leaf blower 1 hour out of that 8-hour period, right? So to do that, 1/4 of a gallon 5 times a week, that's 1.25, that's 1.25 gallons a week. And 1.25 gallons times 50 weeks, I guess you get 2 weeks off. That's 62.5 gallons. And I went to the AAA website, and the average price for fuel in Kitsap County is $4.28 per gallon. So at this very conservative, just 1 hour of use per day, and that's only 5 days a week. A lot of these folks work 6 days a week. 428 times 62.5 gallons is $267 annually, just that much. And I'm assuming a lot more will do that. So there's two things here. One, by getting into an electric device, you're going to save a minimum of that amount, and probably more, hundreds of dollars a year, obviously getting the benefits of non-pollution. And you're going to be able to pay that back. That's something off your budget, and it's going to be something that you don't have to maintain. And these machines need maintenance. They're much more complicated. Leaf blowers are electric motors and they're batteries. It's very simple. They don't need a lot of maintenance, and they'll last a long time. So these are some concerns that weren't brought up, but I wanted to bring them to your attention. And there's a lot of benefits, both on monetary side as well as, importantly, the health benefits for these people. These operators breathing in pollution of levels that we would never tolerate. Thank you.
I see a couple more lights. I haven't spoken yet, and I'm going to maybe surprise you. I don't have any wonky details, but just some general principles. The city has set a very good example. I have nothing against that at all. Regulating our own activities and their consequences is important and very important thing for us to do. When it comes to other people around the island and organizations, the parks, school district, land trust, Lodell Reserve, Islandwood, they should be making their own policies. And they can follow our good example, or they can do some things and not others. Whatever they feel is best for themselves and their environment, their community, that should be up to them. I think voluntary compliance is preferable by far to rules-based compliance. I have nothing against all the things that have been said against leaf blowers. We should, neighbors are the best regulators of leaf blower activity. The people who are directly impacted by people who are doing a job that maybe should be done differently. That's at the personal level. That's where you deal with a leaf blower activity, I think. I think tool lending, we can do that without an ordinance, or we can motivate it to being done. I think talk to Sustainable Bainbridge, get them together with Barn. They could set something up with maybe a little fundraising and motivating of people and so on. That would be really helpful. But I don't see the need for a complicated ordinance. I really don't. I go ahead and do it, but I probably won't go along. So that's my maverick voice for the night.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, and Mayor Matthews, and then Councilmember Hot Topic.
Super fast. I think this would be a great topic for a collaboration cafe, number one. And number two, just to make sure that any communications that we have on this are bilingual English, Spanish. That's
good.
Yeah, well, this was what I was gonna say before Deputy Mayor spoke, and so it kind of addresses this as well. When that was that I wanted to be clear that when I said that I was wholly on board with the leaf blower and wanted to talk maybe about how we do the other ones. I think these should all be banned ultimately, and it's a matter of how we unroll these. I don't think there's any question that mowers in particular are a major problem. And there's no question that these are notable contributors to climate, and they are, I think that's why it is our business. It's our community's business and our city's business as to whether private individuals and organizations are making decisions about polluting our air from a lung perspective to adding to climate change. So I guess what I wanted to say is there's been some traction on other tools. And to me, it's just a matter of whether our first pass of this is an ordinance that phases in a certain number of tools, or whether we do this with leaf blowers or one or two tools. And we know that in the long run, there will be more and they will be phased in. And these will go by the wayside. I say this as someone who hasn't owned a gas powered piece of lawn equipment since I was in college. That's quite a while. And so I know that they work, and maybe they don't work quite as hard as the gas powered stuff, but they do work. And what's at stake makes it worth it. So there's a lot of nuance that we can do later about the large organizations and the distinction between a riding mower and a pushing mower when we get there. The last thing I just wanted to say was, well, two things. One thing I thought was kind of funny online, which was that there's a campaign in one of these cities or states, I think, that's called Make America Rake Again. I thought that was kind of funny because that's one of the reasons why the blowers are such an easy one. You could rake if you really don't like the electric. But the other one was, the mayor had mentioned a couple times, she used the word backpack blower, and I just want to be clear what we're talking about. To me, we're talking about gas mowers, and some of them are in a kind of sling, I think, and not just the gas, but I hope that we're all talking the same language, and we're talking about gas powered.
City Manager, do you have any final comments?
The general comments I heard is that there's support for an ordinance that would look at the prohibition of gas-powered blowers. And staff will work on drafting that ordinance. We'll look probably with a 24-month implementation date. The ordinance would be enforced against the property owners. We will add a couple tools that you can deliberate about, and I would anticipate in a month or a month and a half, bringing to you an ordinance for introduction, not for adoption, but for introduction. And then finally, there's some expectation that the state of Washington will take action itself, and then that will usurp the local action. Right now, most state legislatures are pointing to cities being the ones that are the vanguards. I do know California the best, and California has placed a prohibition on the sale of all they call them SOARs, small off-road engines of 25 horsepower or less. And that includes generators, chainsaws, all types of equipment, 25 horse. But that's just a prohibition on the sale of it, with the idea that over time, there will be elimination of all the gas engines of that type. But anyway, I'm repeating myself now. The expectation is that we'll present an ordinance to the council, and then the council can start to work on that, working towards the eventual adoption.
Committee reports. Does anyone have activity or responsibilities to report? Councilor Moravec and then Mayor Matthews.
I always get some YouTube too.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's not a report, but if I could have a few moments, we've received emails and concerns from constituents about what's happening nationally, and it also has a very close and local impact historically here. And what I'm referring to are these illegal deportations of people from Venezuela by the current administration, and they're using what's called the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. I'd like to remind you that the Constitution wasn't ratified until 1788. So this is 10 years into a brand new country. And there's a lot of fear at that time. We weren't a very powerful country, so they wanted to make sure they could protect themselves. But the law says clearly, it only be implied during a declared war between the United States and any foreign nation or government, or any invasion or predatory incursion shall be perpetrated, attempted, or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government. We're not at war with Venezuela, nor has there ever been a declaration of war. These 328 people that have been shipped off to Costa Rica, and these other ones have been arrested and sent over to Guantanamo Bay after a court order told them not to do it. We're not government actors. They don't belong to, they're maybe Venezuelan citizens, but they're not sent by the state. And so all of this is illegal. And the Alien Enemies Act was used in World War II. And if you could throw up a slide, they used it as an example to, well, that's really blurry. I'm sorry, it's a bad cover. We'll throw it up, it's all right. This is a image of a map that was, it's better, of, you can see this, on Pearl Harbor Day and the day after. The FBI went to these 23 cities in the territory of Hawaii, and in less than 36 hours rounded up. Actually, that number's wrong. It was 1,291 Japanese American aliens and nationals without any court warrants, charges, trials, or even suspicion. And that was the first use of the Alien Enemies Act. They used that as an example. And here on Bainbridge Island on February 4th, 1942, the FBI came to our island, and including the support of all the Kitsap County sheriffs and Washington State Patrol, they raided all 50 Japanese American homes simultaneously. I want to stress that simultaneously, 1942. You know, we use GPS and we can't get together at the same time. Back then, most of those homes didn't have road addresses. It was a farming rural area. There weren't even cross island roads in some cases. And yet the FBI was able to do this simultaneously, which meant there had to be at least one FBI agent and or sheriff and or police officer. So that's more than 100 personnel. It was more likely like 150. And he took away more than 30 of our individuals who are leaders in our community, again, without any kind of charges, trials, or sanctions. The Alien Enemies Act was used to also round up a lot of German and Italian nationals. All told, during the war, about 33,000 German nationals, Italian nationals, and Japanese Americans and nationals were rounded up under this Alien Enemies Act. It also helped give the foundation for then the forced removal by Franklin Roosevelt in executive order on February 19th, 1942. Why we're bringing it up is that this island reacted differently. There was a national wave. It was the President of the United States, I'll say Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's not a partisan thing. And no one in Congress, it's been looked by all the historians, not one person in Congress raised even a bare issue or concern about it. They were really rushing it forward. Actually, the delegation from California was really pushing it, and the California Attorney General really wanted it because he wanted to be a senator or a congressman. That Attorney General's name was Earl Warren, who later became a Supreme Court justice and a leader in civil rights. But he, at that time, got caught up in the fear and racism and all the rest. And that executive order then created all of this mass exclusion. But this island said no. Walt and Millie Woodward, they were the editors of the paper. They editorialized at the beginning saying, these are our friends and neighbors, on a edition on December 8th, said, don't rush to mob rule. There's no evidence of disloyalty. When Roosevelt signed the executive order, go look it up. The editorial was blistering. Mr. President, these are American citizens. This is unconstitutional. He's the only newspaper in the entire country that held that stand. The only one. And our friends and neighbors on this island looked after their properties. And again, more than half came back. There's not another community that got even close to 30%. So our island was different and unique. But the plus I see today is back then, with the exception of, there were people up and down the coast who looked after their friends, but Bainbridge was pretty solid in its view. But the Japanese Americans are pretty much alone. This time around, a lot of people are having the backs of those who are being unlawfully gathered. That's what I think is the hopeful part, that there are more voices now saying, this is not right. This is not, shouldn't happen. And so we're speaking out, and I'd like to remind people, if they think we haven't done anything, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to February 11th, where we reread our welcoming community statement. I had the honor of reading that, and our mayor read the police deal, and it's what gives the police, this was done, these resolutions were done last time. This is Trump 2.0. We did this 8 years ago when they were taking the Muslims away illegally and unconstitutionally. But these two the order says our police department will not participate in that. We will not help in any kind of exclusion or rounding up. And we had to re-say that again. So we were ahead of that curve even back then. And we're doing it now. Those of you who've gone to the memorial site, you know what it is. It says, Nidoto Nayoni, let it not happen again. We picked that because we wanted it to be inspirational and aspirational. But on its face, it's failed. It's failed. We've tried our best to get that message out there, but now we're back to this point, and we're at a constitutional crisis. Violating orders from the courts. He just did it. You can't ship those people off to Guantanamo and did it anyway. So these are really uncharted waters, but I hope all of my friends and colleagues on the dais up here would agree that we are not following that tide. We're going to follow in the legacy of Bainbridge Island, of protecting your friends and neighbors, standing up for the Constitution. I think that's what we all are here for. And actually, we all swore an oath to protect that Constitution. So I think we're trying to live up to that oath. And I'm speaking hopefully on behalf of my colleagues, but we're all united up here in fighting against this. Thank you.
Mayor Matthews, and then Councilmember Dietz.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rocky. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we represent all citizens here. We're nonpartisan as a body, and so that's something to always remember. we can't control anything that's happening nationally, but what we can control here is how we respond to things and how we treat others in our community. Fear and division are a tactic many times, and and we don't have to buy into it. We can treat each other with respect. We can love each other here, and we can have each other's backs and not let it happen again. I see some things on, Bainbridge Islanders, or yes, I read it sometimes, or Open Community, that are just really sad to see how we're treating each other and letting divisions get to our community. This is our community. This is Bainbridge Island. We don't do this here. No matter who you voted for or what your beliefs are, just lead with love and neighbor and loving your neighbor. We definitely have so many more things that connect us than divide us. Let's work on those. So thank you, Councilmember Morawaki. And then I did have actual things that I did. So I testified in favor of Rep. Nance's mosquito fleet bill yesterday before the Senate Transportation Committee, and then went to the Kitsap County Emergency Management Open House on, I guess, last Thursday or Friday. Really, really great facility. And then we also on Friday had a Puget Sound Regional Council Fund Our Ferries meeting where the new deputy secretary was there and answered a lot of our questions, as well as someone from the Senate Transportation Committee. And then we also had our KEDA Executive Committee. This coming Saturday at 9:30 at Bainbridge High School will be what are they calling it? A town hall with Senator Drew Hansen, Rep. Greg Nance, and Rep. Tara Simmons. I'm the MC. Definitely come, bring your questions, but please, most of all, bring your unity. We are all one here, and let's really make that happen.
Councilmember Schneider, and then Councilmember Dietz, and then get my memory shot this time of day. Leslie Schneider.
Deputy Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
you're ignoring me tonight.
No.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, we all get together.
Yeah. No, anyway, I do want to address Councilmember Morawaki, very eloquently stated the history and the past and present of our situation, which I think we all share is just appalling. And I personally am quite angry, and but I think Councilmember Morawaki's point that Bainbridge set a very high standard during World War II, and we need to think of that standard. And I say that because I had a constituent in Winslow, by virtue of the car he has, was keyed with a obscenity today. And he had nothing to do with the owner of that car company, none whatsoever. He's quite the liberal for what it matters. So we cannot lash out at people by virtue of the car that they happen to be driving. That is, I think we have to have a very firm stance. That is the wrong direction. It's a violent reaction. And in that mode, one thing that I'm doing, just why folks wouldn't know this, but I'm organizing a workshop with an organization that has a lot of experience in nonviolent civil protests. And for folks who are thinking about going to a protest but doing it safely, feel free to reach out to me, because I'm going to be organizing a free about 2.5-hour workshop on how to be safe in a civil protest, because this is the direction we're at, and we have to think about safety. We have to think about for ourselves and for others. So thank you, Councilmember Morawaki, for bringing this up, and I very much appreciate the great words of the mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Schneider now.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I guess first of all, I'll just mention that I went to the Puget Sound Regional Council Transportation Policy Board meeting. It feels blurry now, but I think it was last Thursday. And it was wonderful. We were encouraged for that meeting to show up in person. I have shown up in person to a number of these meetings, but I tend to be kind of the only, one of about 3 or 4 people who show up in person. And this time they really encouraged us to come, and then they fed us a lunch. So that got quite a few more of us to show up. And as a result of that, I ended up having a really wonderful conversation with her name is Chrissy, from the Clean Air Agency. And she would be willing to come and, give, come to council to a study session or something and give us a report. And I just think that that could really be something that we would like. And Councilmember Dietz, I think she mentioned you specifically and said we were very well represented by you. So just wanted to share that. And then the safety plan in that organization is very much under review right now. So I don't know, I feel a little bit alone. I'd love to have some staff participation. I'd love to have, maybe some guidance from a couple other council members or something, but we're going deep into the safety plan. And I really feel that Bainbridge needs to be upping our game in that respect. And then switching subjects, my colleagues, Kirsten Hytopoulos and Ashley Matthews and I put on our collaboration cafe last night, and we had a number of other council members come and join us. We're very grateful that you came. It was noticed. It was all very legal. And we also had a couple members of Kitsap Transit, including the executive director, come. And we had a wonderful group. There was probably 30 participants who were not any of the sort of the official types, right? And they were the ones that we really wanted to be sitting around the tables and having these conversations. And then after we went through a series of the questions, we all got into a big circle and just had kind of a report back. And I'll tell you, that report back at the end was amazing. I mean, it was so heartfelt to hear people share how that conversation made them feel. And we got some good feedback on how we might do things a little bit differently next time. But in general, I think all three of us were very gratified. I'll let you all chime in yourselves, but I just wanted to share that I think we would like to do that again, and keep it going. And I think we proved that it has a lot of benefit to the community. Thanks.
Councilmember Fantroy Johnson and then Councilmember Hytopoulos.
I just wanted to remind everybody that March 29th is going to be the anti-racism bystander training here at City Hall. It is at 3 p.m. No, I'm sorry, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Councilmember Hytopoulos.
Yeah, I just want to, so basically follow up on what Councilmember Schneider said and that bring it back to what else has been set up here with regards to us as a community. And that is that, one of the things, it was definitely very gratifying to hear from community members who attended that they felt heard and that it was a good exercise and so forth. And it also was so wonderful to see these people come and give their time and really pay attention and get, commit to the work they were doing in a time when we're dealing with the stuff that everyone's been talking about up here. And I think that two things, one that I've always said, and I'm the only one that's ever said this, is people can do so much locally, and so many people eschew the local act, getting involved locally because they're overwhelmed by this national stuff we're dealing with. But we can do so much locally. And when you combine that fact with using processes that really do respect the individual citizens and try to pull their wisdom and give them a real place to feel heard, we're just doing so much. So I do hope we have more of these in the future and that people will feel safe and hopeful to come in and join it. And so we can make those connections.
Can I pipe in about our collaboration cafe real quick?
Sorry. I was recognized next.
Go ahead with that. And
I was just going to add to both Councilmember Hytopoulos and Councilmember Schneider's about the Collaboration Cafe. I was blown away by the entire experience. I actually got a little emotional when I got home thinking about what we had actually put together and done, to think about how it just came from this great idea that Councilmember Hytopoulos had to voluntold us to the Waselli. No, just it was her idea, and it was really cool that we applied. I had no idea what would come out of it. So it was, I think Councilmember Morawaki called it a salve. That was how he referred to it in the circle, because of all the things going on in the world right now, for folks to make space, to take time, pause and work together, collaborate, and then discuss it. It just set the table and just showed me how much possibility we have in this community. And I was really proud of our community listening and proud of our team. So thank you, team.
I have kind of a miscellany of things important to me to say at this moment. I could talk at length about things last Thursday, the meeting of the steering committee in the afternoon and the planning commission in the evening. As I say, there's a lot to be said, and I want to pass on to other things, but just note that these are important things, steps being taken in the long process of work on the Winslow sub-area plan and the comprehensive plan. The most important thing I want to say, I guess, is to join Clarence Morawaki in his comments on our history. Walt and Millie Woodward were Republicans. Most of the island voted Republican if they voted. And that's my parents' generation. Rural America, small town America was different from the city machines and politics of that kind. That's it was neighbor to neighbor togetherness, and there was also the experience of isolation, and it's remarkable that people did come together so much as they did over those war years. And in the following years, the growing of the island immediately after World War II. If you think growth is a problem on this island, growth was necessary, growth was positive, growth was community building in all sorts of ways. Just one other thing that probably is unrelated among the things I did. Well, no, something that is connected. On Sunday, I went to the Indivisible Bainbridge gathering at the firehouse. It was a good meeting. I was the only council member there. I saw a lot of people I knew and many that I didn't know. Among things coming out of Indivisible Bainbridge is an event on April 5th in concert with demonstrations around the country. There'll be a gathering at Winslow Way and 305, and a walk of however many people gather in the direction of City Hall. So that'll be a Saturday, and it'll be a peaceful gathering, I'm certain, and it'll be carried out carefully. And I know the police are alert to this. It's an important opportunity for the community to come together. I don't know if there's featured speakers or what, but just togetherness is important. On a different scale, I experienced a great togetherness in a performance at Bainbridge Performing Arts. I had missed a lot of things that have happened there since the reopening of a splendid performance facility. The play Eurydice, still there. See it if you have any interest in theater. I've missed a lot of theater, but there's nothing like it. And the space is used so imaginatively, the lighting, the spareness of all sorts of things, but every detail is calculated for very nuanced representation of emotional stress and positive feeling. And Well, it's ineffable. It was a splendid experience and I look forward to more events in that wonderful performance space, music and theater of all kinds. Councilmember Moravec.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a closing, thank you, Mayor Matthews, for mentioning that comment. I did feel like it was a salve. It felt, and to you and Kirsten and Leslie, congrats. You did a good job and it was a good turnout and you did yourselves proud. I'm glad we got to ride the coattails a little bit. And Councilmember Schneider reminded me that, at Kitsap 911, we meet at 12:30, so we always get lunch. And I'm bringing that up because there's an opportunity for myself to go actually visit the 911 call center. And so if other of you are interested, and I hope some of you are, I'll try to find a date where we can do that together because it's supposed to be really fascinating to see it work. So I invite all of you to join if you wish.
I think it's time to adjourn.